Companies have made progress on leaks, though none have achieved the top rating. The UK population has seen its largest annual increase since 1971, new figures have suggested. The Office for National Statistics estimates the total population grew by 1% in just a year, reaching 68.3 million people by mid-2023, covering England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The ONS says that migration was the main factor behind the latest rise, as deaths exceeded births by around 16,300 in the same period. The race to lead the Conservative Party is in its final stages, with just days left to decide the opposition leader. 4 candidates are battling it out: Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch, James Cleverly and Tom Tugendhat. But by tonight, one will be eliminated. Then on Wednesday, the final 2 will be selected, leaving Conservative members to make the ultimate choice. And this morning, we were joined on breakfast by Shadow Minister for Education, Damien Heinz, and he told us there's a field of 4 standout candidates to choose from.
We've not made a declaration. I think we've got 4 really strong candidates. Obviously, we've got a round today, another round tomorrow, and then there'll be the members round. I took a decision at the start of the contest not to make a declaration until we got to that final stage. But I think it's been a very well contested election. Obviously, at the party conference last week, that was a really important opportunity for people to set out their stall, and I think both party members and, of course, the wider public got a chance to see all 4 of them in action.
Well, some breaking news from the Foreign Office in the last hour or so. They have now imposed sanctions on Russian troops accused of using chemical weapons in the battlefield in Ukraine. Those sanctions target Russia's radiological, chemical and biological defence troops, along with their commander. The UK government made that move just hours ago, calling it part of ongoing efforts to hold Russia accountable. Though at this stage, there's been no response from Moscow so far. Turning now to the Middle East, and more than 80 missiles have been launched from Lebanon towards northern Israel in a significant burst of fire this morning. That's according to the Israeli military. Well, these are the live pictures we can bring you now of the scenes above Beirut. You can just about make out there the smoke lingering in the air following those strikes. It comes less than 24 hours after Israel marked the anniversary of the Hamas attacks and killed a key Hezbollah commander in Beirut. Meanwhile, evacuations are still underway in the Lebanese capital. 400,000 people have already fled, seeking safety in Syria amid growing fears of a wider conflict in the region. Over 1,400 people have now been killed in Lebanon, while the death toll in Gaza is closing in to 42,000 people. Here, meanwhile, pro-Palestine activists have targeted the offices of financial services firm Allianz across the UK. Police have had to cordon off offices in the heart of London's financial district after protesters covered buildings with red paint. Palestine Action says the protests are over the business's alleged links to an Israeli defence firm. 10 of Allianz's offices were hit in those protests, including its headquarters in Guildford, where demonstrators are still protesting. And in the US, Donald Trump marked that 1-year anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel, calling it a nightmare. Speaking to a packed ballroom at his Miami golf club, the former president addressed a group of supporters, blaming the rise of anti-Semitism in the US on Democrats.
A lot of that has to do with the leadership of this country. This attack, the October 7th attack, would never have happened if I was president. I can tell you.
And with just 29 days until the US election, Kamala Harris has been facing questions on critical issues, including the Middle East, in a one-on-one interview with CBS News. Amid growing criticism over her limited media appearances, the Vice President addressed topics like Ukraine, gun ownership in the US and immigration. Then, in one tense moment, she refused to call the Israeli Prime Minister a strong ally of the US after recent disagreements.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Staying with international news and turning to Germany, Christian Bruckner, a suspect in the disappearance of Madelaine McCann, has today been acquitted in an unrelated sexual abuse case involving 3 counts of rape, 2 of sexual abuse. The 47-year-old is under investigation for the suspected murder of Madelaine McCann, but hasn't been charged in the case. He lived, of course, in Portugal around the time of Madeleine's disappearance in 2007, but still denies any involvement. And finally, Hurricane Milton has been upgraded to a Category 5 storm, prompting Florida's biggest evacuation in 7 years. These satellite images show the storm churning through the Gulf of Mexico with winds reaching up to 180 miles an hour. It's set to make landfall on Wednesday, with forecasters there warning of storm surges up to 12 feet. That would be the highest ever for the region. Florida's emergency departments, meanwhile, say residents should prepare for the largest evacuation since Hurricane Irma in 2017. And it comes just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene claimed over 200 lives in the southeast of the United States. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you for another roundup in about half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 10 minutes past midday. Now, later today, a quarter will become a trio, or really, that should be a quartet, should become a trio, in the Conservative leadership race at this party's MPs' vote to further whittle down their field.
Yes, 4 will become 3. Former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick, he remains the favourite, just as he still has the most public backers, but Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly appears to be gaining rather a lot of momentum after what most people consider a strong showing at the Conservative Party conference, at least most commentators, it seems.
Well, he seems to have been given a boost with the endorsement of Mel Stride, whose 16 supporters in the last round could be key in such a tight race.
OK, meanwhile, the Lord Ali cash for access row looks set to be reignited as a new book claims fresh revelations over the extent, just how far his influence was and is on the new Labour government.
Well, let's get more on all of this now with GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster, because, Catherine, it's this afternoon that 4 will become 3.
Yes, it is. Good afternoon, Tom and Emily. I was just over in Portcullis House in Westminster talking to people. It gets serious today and tomorrow. 4 will become 3 today, and then 3 will become 2 tomorrow, and then those final 2 go to Conservative Party members. We'll have the new leader not till November the 2nd. MPs start voting from 1:30. We will get the result at 3:30 in Committee Room 14. Now, all the leadership candidates' teams are talking positively this morning to me, as you would expect. But the current expectation is that it is most likely that Tom Tugendhat will go out today. Probably. Robert Jenrick's team feel, as they felt right throughout the campaign, to be honest, weeks and weeks ago, they said to me they were confident of making the final 2. Kemi Badenoch, the other favourite, her team have said they're feeling pretty bullish, but they've also admitted that it is going to be tight. They feel that there has been a Stop Kemi campaign because the polling of members shows that if she gets to the members, she's likely to be elected leader. But I think there's a big question mark over whether it's going to be her who gets to those final 2 or James Cleverly, because he does seem to have gained momentum. He had, I would say, the best conference last week. His speech talking about being optimistic and being, frankly, a bit more normal went down very, very well in the hall. Both Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch had a few rocky moments last week, so it'll be very interesting to see. But James Cleverly is not without problems too, because of course this row that's exploded over the Chagos Islands. While he was Foreign Secretary, he was helping to negotiate that. That was happening on his watch. When David Cameron came in, he put a pause on that, and Labour, of course, have got it over the line to the fury of many. So there's some other teams that think that that could hurt James Cleverly. It certainly feels like he's got the momentum at the moment. And of course, Mel Stride has come out to support him. He had 16 MPs backing him in the last round. But of course, they're a fickle bunch, Conservative MPs. I think we can't just assume that because Mel Stride says he's backing James Cleverly, that all those 16 people are going to go over to James Cleverly. So a very interesting vote this afternoon, and then an even more significant one tomorrow at 3:30.
Yes, I guess who you backed a month ago may well be quite different today after everything that's happened, after the Tory conference, after all the headlines, various gaffes as well too. Catherine, thank you very much indeed. Catherine Forster, GBNews political correspondent there from Westminster. Shall we now speak to political commentator Benedict Spence? Benedict, Keir Starmer, he's hosting his cabinet this morning. We'll be speaking to Christopher Hope, our political editor, very soon to see what exactly was said there. But it's rather a different-looking number 10 operation, isn't it?
It is, now that Sue Gray has sadly departed for more tropical climes in the nations and regions, heading up her new role as the Prime Minister's vizier. It's gone really well, hasn't it, the first 100 days? We're not even at the first 100 days yet. And we're already having the sort of the fantasy football wildcard option of having to rip up your team and starting again. Look, I mean, it's in some ways it's quite reassuring to know that actually, even though governments change, infighting in number 10 doesn't. This was one of the things, of course, that put paid to Boris Johnson when all things were going very swimmingly for him, is factionalism. Morgan McSweeney, who is the person who is now charged with taking over from Sue Gray and is supposedly the mastermind behind Labour's election win, in which they simply had to not be the Tories and to win a majority, and they did very well. This is now the person that is effectively going to be running the operation. Supposedly is much more blue Labour, I suppose, which is what the Novara media crowd would therefore call a Tory. But you know, realistically, what does that mean? I doubt very much that we're going to be seeing any of the sort of the flagship policies that Rachel Reeves has been sort of floating in the budget taken off the table or anything like that. It's still a bad time for growth, a bad time for free speech. It's just hoped that things are going to go a little bit more smoothly is, I think, the what we have to look forward to.
But Benedict, to weave these two stories together, I mean, do the Tories really want to be narrowing down their leadership options? It seems that without a leader, without the focus on the Conservative Party, there's been rather a focus on the Labour Party, on the new government, on the sleaze, on the scandal, and on the mismanagement, frankly, behind that shining black door to number 10. Perhaps the Conservative Party would be better off not having a leader for a little while longer.
I mean, there is something to be said about an individual becoming a lightning rod for everything possibly going wrong. And this is, I suppose, something that we are going to find out as we whittle it down from 4 to 3 to 2, is that far more will be made of the track records of whoever it is that wants to become the next leader of the opposition. And of course, we've already discussed this, haven't we? What with James Cleverly riding high at Tory conference going, oh, very well. And then, oh, dear, these islands that he was negotiating over have been given away. And suddenly people remember that's something that happened. We're going to get more of that, obviously, when it comes. Inevitably, look, Robert Jenrick's going to get probably into the final 2, at which point people will start remembering that once upon a time he was a centrist Cameroon and not this sort of right-wing firebrand, and people will start asking questions like, OK, the last 6 months you've been very right-wing. Where were you for the rest of your time as a Conservative MP? And you'll get similar things with Kemi Badenoch. We've already seen it, of course, the sort of the personal barbs about her rudeness, about her tardiness, all that sort of thing. That will intensify if she gets to the final 2. But right now, I mean, as Catherine Forster was saying there, it looks like Tom Tugendhat is probably gone, which is ironic because he's the one that polls the best in the country at large. So that would be very, very typical of the Conservatives to get rid of the most popular candidate. And then it looks like it's probably going to be James Cleverly and realistically Robert Jenrick, at which point the fun can begin and we can start sticking the boot back into the Tories once again, because we'll have 2 actual candidates that we can pay attention to. And that's within our bandwidth, I think. 2 is enough.
How exciting, Benedict. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Benedict Spence, political commentator. We were Benedict just mentioned Robert Jenrick, and of course he's been talking a lot about Leaving the ECHR, and speaking of the ECHR, an Albanian criminal who sneaked back into Britain after being deported, well, he's won the right to stay under the European Convention on Human Rights.
Yes, Ardit Binaj was freed 6 months ago into a 2.5-year jail sentence for burglary and deported as part of a prisoner transfer agreement with Albania.
But he came back to Britain to be with his Lithuanian girlfriend, and now, married, he is staying here as he apparently has a right to a family life. OK.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is a human rights lawyer, Dr. Shoaib Khan. And firstly of all, Shoaib, this is someone who entered the country illegally twice and now can stay. Is this not just a green light to anyone who enters the country illegally? You know, hook up with a girlfriend and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on how you, how you treat family life or how you treat, I mean, the whole point is it's not just about a girlfriend. Obviously, they're married now, she's a wife. But secondly, they have a son. The point is, yes, he committed a crime. He was in his 20s. He went to prison for it. He was released early under a legal scheme, under a treaty agreement that the UK British government had signed. So he did nothing, so he completed his time there. And now, if he has a son, then I don't see why he should be, or particularly why should this son, the baby, be deprived of being able to live with his father now?
I mean, Shoaib, the ECHR is disproportionately helping people who come to this country and commit crimes, isn't it? Some are calling it a charter for criminals now.
No, of course it's not. I mean, and that's the whole point. We were just talking in the previous segment about freedom of speech, right to fair trial. There's so many other things. Obviously, that's what the ECHR does. The point is that most of those times, I mean, in fact, without naming names, but, so many times, so many politicians, when they do get in a bit of a pickle, let's say, it is human rights law that they go for. So many media personalities, so many, right-wing media channels, newspapers and so on. So whenever there are some problems, then it is human rights that they go for, ECHR Human Rights Act. That is what they're, and that is the whole point. They're here for all of us. They are here
Isn't
for all
there a
of us. And that's the
difference
thing.
here, Shoaib? I mean, in some countries, like the United States of America, for example, you've got a Bill of Rights that is a list of restrictions on what the government can do. That's very clear. The government shall not infringe upon your right to do X, Y or Z. In the European sphere, instead, we have all of these positive rights, these things that the government must do for you. These are impositions upon the individual rather than freedoms for the individual. It's a completely inverted way at looking at rights. And so what we have here is two non-citizens, one who entered twice to this country illegally, have a child in this country who now has the positive right to free education paid for by the taxpayer, to all of these services that people can expect in this country. Is this not an inverted way at looking at rights compared to how, for example, traditionally British people would look at rights or how Americans do today?
No, because, I mean, obviously there are positive rights on this. And in fact, there are under most rights charters. But this isn't, in fact, even a positive right. The point is that they are a family. They have a baby. They're in the UK. The government should not separate them, and that's what the government is prohibited from being done.
Shoaib, do you actually believe that anyone who arrives in this country illegally, who has a prison sentence, who then leaves the country and comes back in, makes a woman pregnant who also isn't British, should just be allowed to stay in this country because of their human rights? I mean, does that not just send an incentive that we do?
What do you mean makes a woman pregnant? It's a married couple who are having a baby. I mean, for anyone else, would be celebrating.
But neither party are British, and one entered illegally.
I mean, the wife, she's a Lithuanian national, and she came here under EU right to freedom when she was able to do that. So there was free movement rights, and lots of Brits went abroad, married European citizens. And so you say, oh, here's a non-Spanish person having a baby in Spain. Here's a non-French person having a baby. But the British, they were European. They were allowed to do that. But
there's an illegal migrant here. I mean, we had, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of legal migrants come to this country over the course of the last year. I think it was gross, maybe perhaps 800,000 or something like that in the last 12 months. You would have thought that if someone wanted to come to this country, had something to offer to come to this country, given the historically high levels of legal migration, they could do so legally.
Firstly, I mean, to be honest, that is, I mean, yes, if you want to come here as a student, if you want to come as a worker, that is, relatively easier to do. If you want to come here to join family, that is very, very hard to do. I mean, even look at the spouse visa. You know, the income threshold used to be 19,000, now it's gone up to 30,000. So many women, I mean, essentially, if you have your husband living abroad, you're basically a single mother bringing up children. You can't work full time, you can't earn 30,000. And those women can never legally be joined by their husbands then. And that's the whole point. If we did away with that, then yes, of course, you might have a point, and we could say there are so many legal routes. Then why do people have to sneak into why did this person have to sneak into the UK to be with his girlfriend? His
Okay, well,
girlfriend
clearly you don't believe there's any such thing as an
family.
illegal migrant, show him. I mean,
Sorry?
I'm sorry, he was illegally here when he
But he had
fathered
a
a
Lithuanian
child.
girlfriend. The girlfriend was here legally.
And a lot of
If they
people will
wanted
be
to get
watching
married-
this. A lot of people will be watching this and saying, well, why doesn't he take his girlfriend to Albania? But apparently the ECHR said that she might not get appropriate healthcare over there.
Yes,
so now
exactly.
we're responsible for Albania's healthcare provision. I mean, it is
No,
crazy.
what we are
Shoaib.
responsible for is a Lithuanian woman, and as far as I can see, even GBNews, others have been reporting that she suffers from serious depression. So if she's a seriously depressed woman, she's had a baby, we shouldn't either separate the family, or we shouldn't first go to, why should she go to Albania? What's Albania got to do with the Lithuanian woman? That's the whole point. They met in the UK, they got married here, they had a baby here. The UK is their home now. It doesn't matter what the colour of their passport. What's Albania got to do with a Lithuanian woman?
Okay.
Why should the family just uproot and go to Albania? I just don't understand.
If someone comes here on holiday and has a baby, are they automatically British?
No, they're not. That's the whole point. They weren't.
But this person was illegally here.
Yes, well, he was here for 10 years. She's been here I don't know how long. They've had a baby together. They want to start a family in the UK. I mean, why should the Lithuanian woman go to Albania? Isn't that...
Well, we do have to get to a break, but we'll be back to this later in the show. But for now, Dr. Shoaib Khan, really appreciate your time discussing this contentious issue with us.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Well, let us know your thoughts at home, gbnews.com/your say. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, we're going to be returning to the turmoil at the heart of number 10. Stay with us.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're joined by Lewis Oakley and Esther Stanhope. And Lewis, let's start with free gear Keir, shall we? It's been the story of the week, and apparently it's led to, well, calamity in the polls.
Yeah, so he has dropped by 26 points in the opinion polls. And, I mean, it's just been sort of going down from day one. He didn't even start that high. But, yeah, this is just bad optics. As we say, like, he hasn't done anything illegal or wrong. Everything was declared. But at the same time, you're telling people they don't get their winter fuel allowance and you're there walking off with your swag bag. It's just not a good look. And even, you know, I was thinking as well, the optics of them trying to clamp down on MPs having second jobs. You know, any of those could turn around and say, well, actually, we have to pay for our own clothes. I just think it's just bad optics that he's had. And, you know, we've got those comparisons of Sunak in the stands. He's just sat amongst the people. And
Prince William goes to Villa games, albeit in the director's box, but it's not an 8k per game seat. And by the way, can I just mention, this isn't just an isolated Labour incident. Since the start of their tenure, they were accused of filling the civil service with previous Labour donors, previous Labour aides, people who worked for Labour Together think tank. The civil service is meant to be politically neutral, and they bypassed a lot of procedures to get people into their positions, not least the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who parachuted Ian Caulfield, his name was, who donated £5,000 personally to her, and then he ended up in the Treasury with a 175k a year job. Yes, he did resign after it was revealed in the Times, but it does make you wonder, you know, you've spent years having a go at the Tories for this, and you do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's full of hypocrisy, and also the whole Sue Gray thing, and they were slagging off the Conservatives for not towing the line, and now they're being hypocrites because now they're taking freebies.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 28 minutes past midday. Now, we're going to return to the story that we were discussing slightly at the top of the hour. That is the turmoil in Number 10. Joining us is the former Labour MP Bill Rammell, because, Bill, it's not particularly usual, not particularly ordinary to lose a chief of staff within 100 days of government.
Well, look, it's not been our best few weeks. I would acknowledge that. And I've got a lot of time for Sue Gray. I worked with her when I was a government minister. However, clearly, I think the appointment wasn't working out. She had to be removed. I think Keir has taken ruthless action in doing that, and he's resetting the organisation within Number 10. I think the broader message is that when you're in government, you need a constant narrative of what the government is doing, why it's doing it, and how it's doing it. And I think that's been missing. There's lots of good stuff that's been happening around a national living wage, about reinstating house building targets to kickstart the economy, the New Deal for working people. All of that needs to be communicated relentlessly. These are missteps. I think Morgan McSweeney, who is a superb political operator, making him Chief of Staff will bring coherence and professionalism to Number 10, and we can move forward and deliver.
And Bill, the issue of Lord Wahid Ali isn't going anywhere either. Front page of the Daily Mail today is that a new book is going to be published by political journalist Tim Ross, which really highlights just how involved Lord Ali was in decision-making, drawing up the timetable for the party's first 100 days, advising on appointments, even attending talks with civil servants. This is likely to reignite the sort of cash for access claims, is it not?
Look, there's a feeding frenzy going on around Lord Ali by Conservative supporting newspapers. Ali was a Labour Party member and a Labour peer way before he became a donor to the Labour Party. And it is absolutely acceptable for a Labour peer or a backbench Labour MP to be involved in meetings with ministers or at Number 10. There have been no rules broken in this regard. Compare and contrast. We keep getting the accusation, well, this is just like the Tories. It's manifestly not just like the Tories. There, the rules were broken. The ministerial code was repeatedly breached and nothing was done about it. There's no sense that anything like that has happened around Lord Ali.
Curious that he doesn't have a formal title, a formal position. If he's doing all of these things behind the scenes, meeting ministers, had a temporary Downing Street pass, but wasn't given a formal role in the running of Number 10. I sort of struggled to sort of realise why that's... If it's all above board, why was it kept so hush-hush? Bill, I'm afraid we're going to have to get to the news headlines because we've got a very anxious Christopher Hope, our political editor, racing down Downing Street to deliver us a readout of the Cabinet meeting this morning. That's coming after your news headlines. Stay with us.
Very good afternoon to you. 32 minutes past 12. A recap of the stories making the news this hour. Sir Keir Starmer is set to attend crucial talks in Berlin, joining leaders from the US, from France, Germany and others on Saturday. The meeting will focus on the ongoing war in Ukraine and the escalating situation in the Middle East. It comes as tensions are rising in Lebanon, prompting urgent diplomatic efforts among the so-called Quad nations. Prime Minister's spokesperson said this morning the meeting highlights the UK's commitment to tackling international issues alongside its allies. Well, that meeting comes after Israel has launched operations in southwest Lebanon today, but says they're limited, they're localised and targeted. Those strikes come as more than 80 missiles have been launched from Lebanon towards northern Israel in a significant burst of fire this morning. Meanwhile, evacuations are still underway in the Lebanese capital, and more than a fifth of the population are now displaced. Over 1,400 people have been killed in Lebanon so far during the conflict. Here, water companies in England and in Wales have been ordered to return more than £157 million to customers for failing to meet crucial targets on pollution. Ofwat, the regulator, has demanded the money comes off of bills for households and businesses in 2025. It follows a previous order to repay £114 million last year. With water bills set to rise by an average of 21% over the next 5 years, Ofwat says that the financial penalties alone won't solve the industry's deep-rooted issues. And the race to lead the Conservative Party is in its final stages, with just days left to decide the opposition leader. 4 candidates are still battling it out: Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch, James Cleverly and Tom Tugendhat. But by tonight, one will be eliminated. Then on Wednesday, the final 2 will be selected, leaving Conservative members to make the ultimate choice. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. Back to Tom and Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office on what could be quite a thundery Tuesday for some of us. Yes, there will be some sunny spells around, but also plenty of showers because low pressure is dominating the story, and this low pressure is leading to quite an unsettled, unstable picture across the UK at the moment. It's also bringing some blustery winds, especially in the southwest, but also some strong winds across northern parts of Scotland too. Otherwise, and there's going to be some persistent rain across parts of northern England and into southern Scotland, and then plenty of showers for many other areas, especially towards the south-southeast, where they could turn heavy and thundery. Temperatures are going to be a little bit on the high side for the time of year, highs of around 18 or 19 Celsius towards the south, a bit fresher further north. As we go through this evening, there will still be some heavy thundery downpours to watch out for, particularly across central southern parts of England and Wales. Could be some disruption. We do have a warning in force. Further north, something a little bit more persistent rain-wise across parts of perhaps Northern Ireland, but also northern England and southern Scotland. And then further north-northeast across Scotland, yes, it's going to still be quite windy, and there will be some further outbreaks of rain as we go through the end of the day. More unsettled wet weather to come for many of us as we go through the end of the day and overnight. The rain and showers starting to ease a little bit, so turning a bit dry as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning, but still some wet weather around. There will be some clear spells here and there, but largely cloudy, so towards the south in particular, it's going to be a relatively mild night, a little bit chillier though further north, with temperatures dropping mid-single figures for some. As we go through tomorrow, a bit of a wet start across eastern parts of Scotland, some parts of northeast England, and rain continuing here for a time, but it should break up and clear away later on. And otherwise, there'll be some showers around again, but they don't look like they'll be as frequent or as intense as the ones that we're going to see today. Temperatures still on the relatively warm side towards the south, but turning colder from the north with a northerly wind.
The latest GB News travel.
Northbound on the M1, 2 lanes are closed. Emergency bridge repairs are taking place at junction 38 for Huddersfield. Traffic is coping well. Slow for the northbound side of the M6 on the exit slip road as it's closed at junction 29 due to an accident. The M25 seeing long delays with 2 lanes closed following an accident and an overturned vehicle between Orpington at junction 4 to Sevenoaks at junction 5. Delays to junction 3 at the Swanley interchange. Southbound on the M23, a lane closure to barrier repairs that continue from 8 through to Gatwick Airport at junction 9, and finally the eastbound side of the M4 queuing to an earlier accident from 18 for Bath through to Chippenham at junction 17. For now, that's the very latest travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
OK, it's now 12:37. You're watching, listening to Good Afternoon Britain, and we're going to go live to Downing Street and speak to GB News political editor Christopher Hope, who is fresh out of lobby for us. Christopher, lots of movements within Number 10, a cabinet meeting this morning. What's being said?
Hi Tom, hi Emily from a very wet Number 10 Downing Street. That's right, Morgan McSweeney, The new Chief of Staff for the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, was in the Cabinet meeting. Sue Gray wasn't. She's now the envoy for nations and regions. Number 10 officials telling us that it is quite normal for McSweeney to be there. He was there previously, but more significant, of course, he now has the levers on how this government acts and maybe pulling it out of its kind of slough of despond we've seen in recent weeks after that rather urgent start they made in the first part of 100 days, which, of course, deadline, the anniversary of which is next week. But the Cabinet was quite a sombre affair. It spoke about the October 7th attacks. There was a briefing now to ministers saying there's a real risk of miscalculation in the Middle East with the fighting between Israel, Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran, of course. There was a briefing to them on the Employment Rights Bill. That's the first reading of which is on Thursday this week. There's a meeting today between Angela Rayner, who's the Deputy Prime Minister, Jonathan Reynolds, the Business Secretary, with a whole array of unions, including USDOR, the TUC, the CWU, Unison, as well as employers, the CBI, Institute Directors and the British Chambers of Commerce. They're all meeting for a kind of modern-day version of the beer and sandwiches meetings we saw in the 70s ahead of this moment on Thursday, which we've long seen coming. Ministers were told about next Monday's investment summit, when the government's trying to bring in lots of foreign investors to the UK, encourage them to invest. I asked, would investors want to come to a summit given the budget is 3 weeks away, and that is feared by many businesses as going to be a problem for them on areas like pension investment and also capital gains tax. But we're told that companies are still investing in this country, notably Amazon and Blackstone. An important moment, we were told. Elsewhere, not much to tell you about HS2 going to Euston. That was floated by Louise Haigh today. Currently, it stops at Old Oak Common outside London. No news there, but we're told there'll be an announcement very, very soon by Louise Haigh, the Transport Secretary. The issue of the Chagos Islands was not raised. There's no plans yet for an investment minister. So steady as she goes, despite polling today giving the Labour just a 1-point lead over the Tory party. Not a lot of news out of this cabinet.
Really interesting stuff, Christopher. Thank you so much for bringing us that. It is concerning, perhaps, that the government is trying to sort of brush under the carpet the sheer consternation that has been going on in that building behind you. Did you get a sense, talking to the Prime Minister's official spokesman, that they sort of understand the gravity of what's gone on?
Well, they appear not to, and I asked them things like, is it a mistake to wait 16 weeks for a budget when Tony Blair's government in 1997 waited just half that time? Is this government drifting? No, they say they're getting on with the priorities. They list what they've done so far: GB Energy, nationalising the rail, of course, the increase in the public sector pay, and they've taken away the benefit from 10 million pensioners this winter, the winter fuel benefit. They maintain there's no problem here, but I do know there's very little planned to be announced between now and October 30th. I mean, really, everyone is waiting on tenterhooks for the budget. It's like a massive tsunami about to break on Whitehall, and we're not sure how the world will look after that. It's a big issue, I think, but I think as for now, they're happy to carry on governing without any big announcements, Tom and Emily.
Particularly when there are so many indicators that actually this very long wait for the budget is having a negative impact on our economy. Anyway, thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, our political editor. We'll speak to you a little bit later. And speaking of the budget and all things financial, analysis by the Adam Smith Institute claims that Britain is set to experience the worst exodus of millionaires in the world.
Well, this is all due to the government's new plans to increase wealth taxes, make changes to non-dom rules and all the other ideas floated about this big disaster budget.
Yes, the analysis predicts that the share of the population who are millionaires is expected to plunge by 20% over the course of this parliament. In contrast, Germany, France, Italy, they're all predicted to grow their share of millionaires.
Well, let's get the thoughts now of Dr. Phil White, a founding member of a group calling themselves Patriotic Millionaires UK. They're the sorts of millionaires who are keen to pay more tax. Dr. Phil, thanks for joining us. First of all, should we be concerned that many of your millionaire compatriots don't really seem to agree with you on high levels of taxation?
Well, hi, Tom, Emily. I think firstly we need to look at that, where that report came from and what it actually says and what it means. But then secondly, I think we need to come on and look at actually what the real issues in the country are and how the finances affect those. But firstly, if we look at that article, it came from the Adam Smith Institute, which was a big backer of Liz Truss and her campaign, her fiscal policies, which frankly didn't end well. Secondly, it was published by the Daily Telegraph, and there was a similar article in the Daily Mail, both of which are owned by non-dom millionaires. So, frankly, not exactly an impartial source.
So, Dr. Phil, I take your point. These are editorial choices. Of course they are, what to publish. And yes, that think tank is a free market think tank, so they do campaign for lower taxes. Of course they do. But does that not make it true? Is it not the case that we may well see millionaire behaviour a change as a result of high taxes, as a result of this long wait for the budget, where capital gains might go up, where there are changes to non-dom status, where potentially there could be other tax rises? Surely behaviour will change.
Yeah, we could see changes in behaviour. And again, the report does confuse demographic changes with people leaving. But, one example, there are examples around the world of putting wealth tax in place. One example is Norway. There was a lot of publicity around 30 millionaires left Norway for Switzerland, but 236,000 decided to stay. So, any changes that we see there tend to be very small because people,
yes, but Dr. Phil, you could also point to France, which has long flirted with the idea of wealth taxes. They brought them in and then been forced to remove them because what did they see? An exodus of millionaires. It was also found that these types of wealth taxes were very hard to make work. It's very hard to judge exactly someone's wealth. And if you do slap a wealth tax on someone, well, then the next year there's less wealth to tax.
There are practicalities associated. I mean, France was much more complicated, and there were things on it, high levels of income tax and so on coming in there. But yes, it is difficult to measure. And again, we're proposing that actually wealth taxes should kick in at quite high levels of wealth. So, you're dealing with people maybe with a wealth level of over £10 million. So it's a finite set of people, and you can start to assess wealth at that point. And we do that anyway for inheritance tax and those things.
And we know how inequitably inheritance tax is applied, because it turns out if you've got 10 million quid, you've probably got very good lawyers, very good accountants. You're probably one of the most mobile people on the face of the planet. And isn't this the issue here? That we're dealing with a hyper-mobile class of people. And this is why it's not just the Adam Smith Institute, the Telegraph and the Mail saying this. It's the Treasury being reported as saying some of these taxes that have been floated would actually be counterproductive. You can't squeeze non-doms anymore because they'll just depart the country. We'll become a country where these hyper-rich people simply do not spend more than 90 days of their time.
It is true that capital is mobile, and that's a real issue. And we need to close off those loopholes that allow the very wealthy to continue to extract this wealth from society and not pay their fair share of tax on it. And that's really important. We're pressing internationally for that to happen as well, because that parity across countries is important.
Hang on, that's a really interesting point there you made. Extract this wealth from society. Do you not believe that millionaires create money? Do you think that there's a flat rate of money and all that happens is it gets piles up at one end? Surely you believe that there is such a thing as economic growth?
Well, economic growth we can measure through GDP or whatever measure takes our fancy kind of thing. But yeah, economic growth does exist, but it's not created exclusively by the wealthy. It's created by people working, by people doing hard work, by people being motivated to work, by people being interested in working, and, a good health system, good public health, that means they're not off sick for half the time and this kind of thing. So actually, no, it's not just, the top 0.1% that's creating all that wealth. And, we've seen the fallacies of that kind of trickle-down argument in the past, which frankly has been discredited over the last 10 years or more. So, yeah, economic growth is important, but it's not due to the very wealthy.
Yeah, I just worry that if we see all these millionaires leave, it's going to be the ordinary Joe who has to cough up the extra tax to keep everything going. That's what I'm worried about. That's what our viewers are worried about, that's for sure. Dr. Phil, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Phil White, founding member of Patriotic Millionaires UK.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's packed show. Yes, Heinz has apologised for their latest ad campaign. Can you see anything wrong with this particular advert?
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Right, up and down the country, many parents are preparing or have indeed already sent their child off to university.
Indeed, but sometimes it can leave parents struggling to cope with the, quote, empty nest syndrome their child leaves behind. So joining us now to discuss how to cope with sending off your sprogs to university, or not so sprogs, is broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Good morning, Lucy. Nice to see you this early. This is a real thing, isn't it? It's our colleague Paul Coitz, our sports expert, describes it as grief, sending your young adults off to uni and leaving the nest for the first time.
Yes, I think grief is the right word because it's an ending. And it's not just an ending with your relationship with your child. It changes from here on in. But it also is very much about your identity. Your identity as a parent is weakening. You'll always be that child's parent, but you're not going to have the same involvement on a daily basis. And so you're left to think, OK, well, what does my life look like going forward? What's my relationship? If you're in a relationship with a partner, how is that going to change? And like all elements of grief, there's going to be a bit of a process. There's going to be that transition period where you adjust to your new life, just as your sprogs, as you call them, are adjusting to their new, exciting phase of their life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, 12:51 is the time, and Heinz has been forced to apologise after an advert featuring an interracial couple drew criticism for the omission of the black bride's father.
Well, social media users accused the brand of reinforcing stereotypes about absent black fathers. Heinz acknowledged the concerns, promising to be more mindful in future campaigns in a, perhaps surprising to some, apology.
Yes, joining us to discuss this is founder and chairman of Frank PR, Graham Goodkind. Graham, how much did they stick their foot in this, and were they right to apologise? What do you think?
I think, yes, absolutely, they were right to apologise because they certainly caused offence to some people. And at the end of the day, they're a brand trying to promote themselves in the best way they think possible. And if they do hurt individuals' feelings, and a whole group of individuals' feelings in this case, then I think it's right that they apologise. I think it's a case of them trying to be a little bit too woke. And it backfired on them. I don't think there's a negative intention there, obviously, from them. But I think, as I said, it's them trying to be a little bit too woke, and they shot themselves in the foot a bit.
Isn't this the risk, though? If you sort of try and go too far one way, then you might go the other way and you might upset both groups in the process. I couldn't see anything wrong. I had to read the articles to sort of discover what people had wrong with this advert. I mean, it doesn't seem the most offensive thing to me, but maybe I'm just not awake enough to the concerns that some have. I mean, should Heinz have drawn attention to it, perhaps, by apologising? If a few people on social media complain about something, can't a brand stick their foot in it to a greater extent by drawing attention to those people who have criticised it?
You're talking a different strategy here, which is people cause controversy deliberately as a way to garner more publicity, and it's a PR stunt. In this case, I don't think it is. You know, Heinz are a major corporation, I'm sure, with a lot of black employees as well, and they wouldn't have wanted to offend that community. For me, this smacks of a bit more is a lack of diversity in the industry that's coming up with the creative ideas for this sort of thing. In the ad industry and in my industry, indeed the public relations industry, there is a woeful lack of diversity. And I think, you know, if there were, I don't know whether there were any black people in the room when this ad was created or devised or approved or discussed at any meeting. I'm sure if there was, then they might have raised the real fact that it's caused offence to some people. And there is a lack of diversity in this industry. And as I said, I point to my own industry in that respect. Indeed, I think if there were more young people in the potential meeting where this ad was aired, discussed, raised, approved, or whatever, I think they'd have probably spotted it.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I actually do think I can see why people find this one offensive, actually, because you've got the white parents there, and then you've got a single black parent there, no father present. I can see why it's found offensive. I do wonder whether these apologies are real, though. It's all a bit sort of, I don't know if it's just so they get more clicks. I don't know. Graham Goodkind, thank you very much indeed. You're the chairman of Frank PR. Thank you for your time.
Well, goodness me, much more to come on Good Afternoon Britain, including more on the turmoil in Downing Street and, of course, what the Tories can make of it. That after the weather.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office on what could be quite a thundery Tuesday for some of us. Yes, there will be some sunny spells around, but also plenty of showers because low pressure is dominating the story, and this low pressure is leading to quite an unsettled, unstable picture across the UK at the moment. It's also bringing some blustery winds, especially in the southwest, but also some strong winds across northern parts of Scotland too. Otherwise, and there's going to be some persistent rain across parts of northern England and into southern Scotland, and then plenty of showers for many other areas, especially towards the south-southeast, where they could turn heavy and thundery. Temperatures are going to be a little bit on the high side for the time of year, highs of around 18 or 19 Celsius towards the south, a bit fresher further north. As we go through this evening, there will still be some heavy thundery downpours to watch out for, particularly across central southern parts of England and Wales. Could be some disruption. We do have a warning in force. Further north, something a little bit more persistent rain-wise across parts of perhaps Northern Ireland, but also northern England and southern Scotland. And then further north-northeast across Scotland, yes, it's going to still be quite windy, and there will be some further outbreaks of rain as we go through the end of the day. More unsettled wet weather to come for many of us as we go through the end of the day and overnight. The rain and showers starting to ease a little bit, so turning a bit dry as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning, but still some wet weather around. There will be some clear spells here and there, but largely cloudy, so towards the south in particular it's going to be a relatively mild night, a little bit chillier though further north, with temperatures dropping mid-single figures for some. As we go through tomorrow, a bit of a wet start across eastern parts of Scotland, some parts of northeast England, and rain continuing here for a time, but it should break up and clear away later on. And otherwise there'll be some showers around again, but they don't look like they'll be as frequent or as intense as the ones that we're going to see today. Temperatures still on the relatively warm side towards the south, but turning colder from the north with a northerly wind.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This week, Free Speech Brighton, a sister group of the Free Speech Union, claimed that they were kicked out of a pub in the city for discussing trans issues in schools. The group booked a room in a pub for an evening of speeches and discussion when they claimed security guards came and asked them to leave after one speaker began to talk about this topic. Now, a clip of the evening was in fact posted to social media. Can you give us some background to what happened, what the event was for, and why you booked it?
Our normal pub was being refurbished, so about 3 weeks ago I went in and booked a local pub for a meeting, and they didn't ask any questions about what sort of meeting. It was in a back room. It was mainly secluded from the rest of the pub, so I thought it would be fine. But anyway, they didn't ask any questions. They took my booking. We arrived, I set up. The first speaker started speaking, who's a retired teacher who is concerned about trans in schools and how that affects children. But she was talking purely about children. She was not talking about adults who have protected characteristics, obviously. And then towards the end of her speech, I became aware of security guards standing behind me in the middle room. So I went to have a quick word with them and see what they wanted. And they said, we've had a complaint. And I said, what's the complaint? And they wouldn't say. Then they said, will you come and talk to the landlord? So I went to the front of the bar and they indicated this chap was the landlord, but he looked about 20, so I don't think he was the landlord. So I said, I hear you have a complaint about us. Can you tell me what it is? And he couldn't.
That sounds very Kafkaesque, as though you've committed a crime, but they can't tell you what the crime
is.
Well,
that's what I couldn't understand, because, you know, you might... Obviously, they can't tell you who the complainant is, but they should be able to tell you what the complaint is.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Tuesday, the 8th of October. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
This just in, the MI5 have foiled more than 20 deadly Iranian terror plots on the UK in just the last 2 years. They're now warning of an increased terror risk due to conflict in the Middle East.
And soft-touch Britain. An Albanian burglar who sneaked back into Britain after being deported has now won the right to stay in the UK, all because he has a baby with his Lithuanian girlfriend, now wife. Deporting him would apparently breach his right to a family life. We're asking, has the ECHR become a charter for criminals?
And it's a knockout. 4 will become 3 today as Conservative MPs dump another leadership contender this afternoon.
Free prescriptions on the chopping block. Rachel Reeves is facing mounting pressure to scrap free prescriptions for those aged 60 to 65. This could save the Treasury millions. Would you back such a move?
Do you know, lots of people getting in touch about the free prescriptions. Lots of people pointing out that in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, you have free prescriptions for life. So how can it be that in England you have to pay for them and then they're trying to get rid of them for 60 to 65-year-olds as well?
Because paying for prescriptions is good, actually.
So why do Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland get away with it?
The NHS performance in these countries is not particularly higher. And one of the big concerns that the NHS has is if prescriptions are free, people get frivolous prescriptions.
I'm not saying whether it's a good or bad policy. It just should be the same across the board, surely.
I can understand why we have some graduated delivery of it. I can't understand why people who are between the age of 60 and 65, who are not pensioners, why are we... I mean, this was a benefit that was initially introduced for pensioners. The pension age grew, but the age of prescriptions didn't grow. I mean, it seemed like a mismatch to me.
Yeah, I think Sharon got in touch a little bit earlier, actually, and she said that she went after the dentist, she had a prescription, and she was shocked to find out that she didn't have to pay for it. She said, I'm not on benefits.
Yes.
And then they said, no, you're over 60, so there you go.
60's not
Have
that
them
old.
for free.
60's the new 50. I mean, no one should... Anyway, we're going to get onto that and so much more throughout the programme. Do keep your views coming in. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved. All that to come, including this new line out of MI5 after your news headlines.
Tom, Emily, thank you very much and good afternoon to you. 2 minutes past 1. We start this lunchtime with that news that the Director General of MI5 has warned that ISIS and al-Qaeda are on the rise again, with an increased terror risk linked to the conflicts going on in the Middle East. In a stark warning today at the Counter-Terrorism Operations Centre, Ken McCallum revealed that Iran has been linked to at least 20 deadly plots in the UK over the past 2 years. He says both groups are attempting to export terror and highlighted the recent deadly attack in Moscow as a brutal demonstration, he says, of what ISIS is capable of. Well, as the conflict between Israel and Iran intensifies, MI5 is on high alert for potential repercussions here in the UK. McCallum also pointed to a worrying rise in state-sponsored threats, particularly from Russia. And speaking of Russia, the Foreign Office has imposed sanctions on Russian troops today, accused of using chemical weapons on the battlefield in Ukraine. Those sanctions target Russia's radiological, chemical and biological defence troops, along with their commander. The UK government made the move just hours ago, calling it part of ongoing efforts to hold Moscow accountable, though at this stage there has been no response from the Kremlin. And Keir Starmer is set for crucial talks in Berlin this weekend, joining leaders from the US, from France and Germany. That meeting will focus on the ongoing war in Ukraine and the escalating situation in the Middle East. It comes as tensions are rising in Lebanon, prompting urgent diplomatic efforts among the so-called Quad nations. The Prime Minister's spokesperson says that meeting highlights the UK's commitment to tackling international issues alongside its allies. Here, meanwhile, water companies in England and in Wales have been ordered to return more than £157 million to customers for failing to meet crucial targets on pollution and interruption to water supplies. Ofwat's demanded that the money comes off of bills for households and from businesses in 2025 to 2026. It follows a previous order to repay £114 million last year. With water bills set to rise by an average of 21% over the next 5 years. The chief executive of Ofwat says that financial penalties alone won't solve the industry's deep-rooted issues. However, some companies have made progress on their leaks, though none have achieved the top rating. Turning to the US, and there are just 29 days until the election there, and Kamala Harris has been facing questions on critical issues, including the Middle East conflict, in a one-on-one interview with CBS News. Amid growing criticism over her limited media appearances during the campaign, the Vice President addressed topics like Ukraine, gun ownership and immigration. There was one tense moment, though, when she refused to call the Israeli Prime Minister a strong ally of the US.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
And in some more news on election results and votes, well, the race to lead the Conservative Party is in its final stages here, with just days left to decide the next opposition leader. 4 candidates are battling it out: Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch, James Cleverly and Tom Tugendhat. But by tonight, one will be eliminated. Then on Wednesday, the final 2 will be selected, leaving Conservative members to make the ultimate choice. This morning, we were joined by Shadow Minister for Education, Damien Heinz, and he told us he thinks there's a field of standout candidates.
We've not made a declaration. I think we've got 4 really strong candidates. Obviously, we've got a round today, another round tomorrow, and then there'll be the members' round. I took a decision at the start of the contest not to make a declaration until we got to that final stage. But I think it's been a very well contested election. Obviously, at the party conference last week, that was a really important opportunity for people to set out their stall, and I think both party members and, of course, the wider public got a chance to see all 4 of them in action.
Christian Bruckner, a suspect in the disappearance of Madelaine McCann, has been acquitted today in an unrelated sexual abuse case involving 3 counts of rape, 2 of sexual assault. The 47-year-old's under investigation for the suspected murder of Madelaine McCann, but he's not been charged in that case. He, of course, lived in Portugal around the time of the girl's disappearance in 2007, but still denies any involvement. And finally, we will end with a recap on the situation in the United States, where now 51 Florida counties are under a state of emergency. In the last few minutes, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who you can see there on the screen, has been holding a press conference where he told people to prepare for what could be the largest evacuation in years, warning that time is, he says, going to start running out for residents very, very soon. These satellite images show that storm churning through the Gulf of Mexico, with winds now reaching up to 180 miles an hour. Forecasters are also warning of an 8 to 12-foot storm surge possible. That would be the highest ever for the region and could bring some widespread flooding. Well, it comes just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene claimed over 200 lives in southeastern United States. Those are the latest headlines for now. We can now hand straight back to Tom and Emily for an update on that breaking news with Mark White.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It is now 1:09, and we're going to bring you some more on the breaking news that MI5 have foiled more than 20 deadly Iranian terror plots in the UK.
Yes, they're now warning that the country is under an increased terror threat due to these tensions in the Middle East.
Well, joining us now with the latest is our Home and Security editor, Mark White. Now, Mark, you were there for the briefing, I believe. A huge amount of very worrying news we've been given.
Yeah, a very sobering assessment coming from Ken McCallum, the Director General of MI5, talking about just how complex the threat that the intelligence agency is facing now, the UK's domestic intelligence service. We've had periods of time when they have been phenomenally busy after 9/11 and the years in and around the attacks on the London transport system in 2005. Then around 2017, with the resurgence or with the rise of the terror group ISIS and all of the related terrorist attacks that took place in the UK at that point. But now they're in another very busy period of very complex threats, ranging from organised terror groups such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS to lone actors and state actors as well. And as far as the organised terror groups are concerned, very worrying, the indications that Al-Qaeda and ISIS are on the rise again and actively looking to attack the West, in particular because of the Middle East conflict. Al-Qaeda is calling for attacks on the West. ISIS, according to Ken McCallum, although it's not the force it was before the coalition forces bombed it back into submission in Syria and Iraq, it is increasingly proving to be a potent threat again, more diffuse in different countries. We saw, he said, the very significant terrorist attack in Moscow in March, in which 145 people were killed in a concert hall and 500 others were injured. This is what he said about the potential for the Middle East sparking more in the way of attacks in the West.
Since January 2022, with police partners, we have responded to 20 Iran-backed plots presenting potentially lethal threats to British citizens and UK residents. As events unfold in the Middle East, we will give our fullest attention to the risk of an increase in or a broadening of Iranian state aggression here in the UK.
So there he was talking specifically about Iran, a state actor, and the fact that over the last year, 20 separate plots have been thwarted, potentially deadly plots. And real concern that as Israel takes a fight to Iran and its proxies, that there is this potential for more attacks. But more broadly, on the threat from other groups, such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda, this is what he said.
Today we are powerfully alive to the risk that events in the Middle East directly trigger terrorist action in the UK, as we saw with last October's knife attack in Hartlepool. The ripples from conflict in that region will not necessarily arrive at our shores in a straightforward fashion. They'll be filtered through the lens of online media and mixed with existing views and grievances in unpredictable ways.
I think a lot of people will have forgotten that there was a confirmed terror attack in Hartlepool because of the way the reporting restrictions were applied at the time. We weren't allowed to talk about this as it was a terror attack until after the sentencing. I've always been fascinated about this because some countries are much more liberal with their media in terms of being able to call a spade a spade. In the UK, it seems that there was this not just the court restrictions, but also this idea that if we talk up the threat of terrorism, perhaps it's more likely that more will be inspired to commit terrorism.
Yeah, and there were particular issues around Hartlepool as well, pointing to the mental health of the the attacker, the killer, the murderer, who's now being convicted, of course, of that horrific attack at the time. So actually that was addressed by Ken McCallum in his speech. He's saying that, you know, the police and the security services sometimes, at times, find it very difficult to make that call and say that this is definitely a terrorist attack or not, because some of these actors are not, you know, responding to direct instructions from terrorist groups. The information, the electronic information that's out there on their devices doesn't necessarily point to the fact that they've been inspired or radicalised by a particular ideology right away, and that can take a bit of time. So, yes, I think a little bit of defensiveness from the MI5 about really what the is clearly amongst the general public, a growing distrust of what we're hearing from the police at times about whether that MI5 are involved in investigating are still Islamist-related plots. 25% can be characterised as far right. But on the issue of younger individuals, under 18s, there has been a 13% increase in the numbers, 13% of all those suspects are actually under the age of 18, and a significant proportion of those are far right inspired, more than Islamist inspired, the younger cohort. But overall, the overarching threat from terrorism is still 75%, three-quarters of the work that MI5, the casework, is Islamist-related.
And fascinating to see that distinction now. For decades, it's been non-state actors that we've been most concerned about, the likes of ISIS and al-Qaeda. Of course, now on the rise again, the big warning. But fascinating that 20 attempted attacks by Iran, a rich state, a petro-state, have been foiled by MI5. I mean, this is a shadow war.
Yeah, and it's been going on for years, but in particular over the last years, that uptick of 20 separate attempts to cause harm to individuals here. Now, some of that was directed at what the regime in Tehran look upon as those that are sort of dissidents that are speaking up against the Iranian regime, such as Iran International, which is that news channel, 24-hour news channel, coming out of the West, being beamed into Iran and being, you know, very sort of anti sort of the mullahs and the Tehran regime in the outlook. And we know that one of the reporters from that particular channel was attacked and stabbed and seriously injured outside his home in London earlier this year. So a very real threat here and a real concern that issue of or focus of Iran on going after sort of dissidents and the like could spread as Iran and its proxies in that region come under more sustained attack from Israel, that it could spread to the likes of Israeli and Jewish interests or even Western interests in the UK and beyond.
That's very interesting. The focus for a long time, yes, on the dissidents who may be living in the UK, taking protection here, but moving towards more large-scale terrorism. Disturbing, very worrying. We'll come back to that later in the show, I'm sure.
Well, later today in Parliament, a quartet will become a trio in the Conservative leadership race. The party's MPs vote to further whittling down that field.
Yes, former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick, he remains the favourite. He still has the most public backers. But Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly appears to be gaining a bit of momentum after quite a strong showing at the Conservative Party conference.
Well, he's also been given a boost with the endorsement of Mel Stride, whose 16 supporters in the last round could be key in such a tight race.
But meanwhile, on the side of Labour, the Lord Ali Cash for Access row looks set to be reignited because a new book is set to make fresh revelations over the extent of his influence on the new Labour government.
Well, let's get reaction now with GB News political editor Christopher Hope, who joins us from Westminster. Indeed, from Downing Street, which seems to be a little drier than last hour when we spoke, Christopher. At least I hope so. Firstly, tell us what was said in Cabinet today. It seems that Sue Gray has been swept aside.
Yes, welcome back to Downing Street, Tommy and Em. That's right, yes, Sue Gray no longer in the building. She's the envoy for nations in the regions. Instead, with Morgan McSweeney, the new Chief of Staff, was on the margins of that cabinet meeting chaired by Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. I should say Morgan McSweeney's been there before in his old role as the Director of Strategy in Number 10, but now he's pulling levers of power and trying to restore this government towards having a degree of momentum it lost, really, after the first few weeks in power. Of course, the 100-day anniversary is next week, when there'll be lots of reflection on how it's going for this Labour government. But the cabinet meeting was dominated by talk about the October 7th attacks. Keir Starmer told the meeting that hostages must be released immediately. Around 100 are still held by Hamas, according to reports. And also he talked about the risk of miscalculation as the hostilities get worse and worse between Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah and Iran, and real concern, I think, in the room there. We heard, the cabinet ministers heard there from Angela Rayner, Jonathan Reynolds, about the Employment Rights Bill. That's being published on Thursday. There's a meeting, a beer and sandwiches meeting this afternoon between unions and employers and Angela Rayner and others about what this will mean for workers. It'll mean day one rights for maternity pay and other measures which employers are worried about. We'll hear more about that on Thursday. Also, there's some briefing ahead of Monday's investment summit, which Rachel Reeves is holding a lot of store by. They're trying to bring in big US companies and other companies to invest in the UK. Amazon, Blackstone have already announced multi-billion-pound investment plans. I asked in the lobby, will these companies want to be there when there's so much concern about the October 30th budget? They said no, look at what's happening already, and they believe they can get money in. All eyes still on the budget on October 30th. Rachel Reeves did brief cabinet ministers about her current thinking, but we won't know anything until that date. And many critics are saying, why on earth are we waiting so long for this budget? And that's maybe one reason why this government appears to be stuck in first gear, nowhere near fifth gear, where they should be, given the scale of their victory back in July. They haven't announced their budget yet because of this requirement for the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, to check out the numbers and not prompt a run on the pound that we saw under Liz Truss. But I do think that has meant this government is in stalling mode, with not much plan to be announced between now and the budget coming up.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Christopher Hope, our political editor there outside Downing Street.
Fascinating point there, that many people have been saying that Sue Gray was the big problem, the big bung on the government having a competent comms agenda. But what if it wasn't Sue Gray? What if it's actually the idea that we haven't had the budget yet, we're not having it for weeks? Is that the actual problem? That people can't announce things until the budget has sort of held everything up in this government, allowing these other stories?
It's not a way to run the country. It's also not very kind to the public. People are genuinely worried about what might be in that budget. It's not good for business, it's not good for consumers, it's not good for people and their mental health. You know?
Yeah.
Actually, genuinely.
No, there's been doom and gloom since day one in this government.
Yeah, you know, do you know whether to invest in property? Do you know whether to buy a house? Do you know whether to get a new job? You know, the jobs market we're reading is pretty slow at the moment.
But all the while,
people aren't hiring.
There's all of this rumour about what's going to happen to inheritance tax, what's going to happen to capital gains tax. So people of means are moving things around right now, which means that if taxes do come in, they're going to have less of an effect.
Yes, you're right. It makes no sense from either side, does it, really? Anyway, we've got lots more coming up on today's show, including whether the ECHR has become some kind of charter for criminals. Apparently, it's just near impossible to deport criminals who are here illegally. That next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Founded in 1990 in Knightsbridge in London, the Beverly Hills Bakery offers some of the finest American baked goods in the United Kingdom. Beverly Hills Bakery has delivered gifts to all the UK Prime Ministers of the last 20 years, with, I think, the exception of Sir Keir Starmer so far, and provided gifts for the royal family and for royal births. As we near the 35th anniversary of the bakery, I'm joined by the owner and head pastry chef, Rosa de Souza, and Manuel de Souza, who is the director of the Beverly Hills Bakery. How marvellous to you both. Welcome to GB News.
Thank you for inviting us.
So, why has this formula worked? Why did London need a Beverly Hills bakery?
What we do is we're a bakery, but underlying it's actually a gifting experience.
Right.
So this is an alternative to flowers. So in terms of concept, that has maintained its originality despite going on for 35 years. And in fact, what I do is I often ask myself, why is it going strong? To remind myself to focus on those things that we need to focus on.
So instead of sending a bunch of flowers, you send a beautiful box of cakes like that, or confection like that, complete with bunnies and so on.
Exactly. So you have the concept on the one hand, but you also need the quality of product that goes inside. And I think that's where Beverly Hills Bakery has got a great product.
And it's where Rosa comes in, isn't it?
Yes.
So when did you start to bake? Did you start to bake domestically in your home, and did it spread from there?
We started from home. My mother's baking, where we didn't have all the stoves and things like that. We baked on the charcoal, you know, like degrees.
Yes.
And we started baking. I learned from my mother the baking.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, well, it's 1:26. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, an Albanian criminal who sneaked back into Britain after being deported has won the right to stay in this country under the European Convention on Human Rights.
What else? Well, Arjit Binaj was freed 6 months into a 2.5-year jail sentence for burglary. He was deported as part of a prisoner transfer agreement with Albania.
But he came back to Britain to be with his Lithuanian girlfriend, and now he's staying here as he has a right to a family life. His girlfriend has had a baby and he has subsequently married her.
Well, joining us to discuss this is the international security and border control expert, Henry Bolton, OBE. Henry, should we be surprised at this? I mean, this is a family of 3. There's a baby who was born in this country, there's a mother who has a right to be in this country, and a father who does not have the right to be in this country. But because of the other 2, now he does have a right to be in this country. I mean, that's sort of what the ECHR says.
Indeed, Tom. First of all, no, we shouldn't be surprised at this. The latest figures that I've got, 2023, there were 4,000 foreign national criminals who were deported. Now, bear in mind that if you cooperate with the programme for removals whilst you're serving in jail, you can leave up to 18 months before you've served your sentence, and you can be paid £1,500 resettlement grant to cooperate with going back to your country. So yeah, that's number one. But number 2, there were 11,800 people who were supposed to be deported, but because the Home Office had not got its act together, logistically or administratively, instead of being deported, those foreign national criminals were released back into the public, if you like. And, you know, so they're still floating around, as far as I know. There's 11,800 of those. So there's no surprise that we've got a problem. And it's not all down to the ECHR. Some of it's down to, a large part of it is down to the inefficiencies of the Home Office. But yes, the ECHR enables criminals to play the game, to sort of to game the system. In this case, for example, an individual marries a woman who's got the right to stay here, has a child by her. Now, I don't know their domestic situation, of course I don't, but it leaves open the ability or the possibility that hardened criminals are actually abusing vulnerable people in such a way. I'm not suggesting that's the case in this situation. I just don't know. But of course, if you can, you know, claim that you've settled down with somebody and had a child with somebody, whether you have any intention of that relationship continuing or not, you've bypassed the system because there is this right to family life. Now, I believe that when somebody comes into this country illegally or legally, they should be required to sign a document that demonstrates that they have been briefed and that they understand that should they, in the event of committing a crime or being found guilty of committing a crime of a certain level, then they will be deported. Whether they serve their sentence beforehand or not, they will be deported. And they understand that, and they have no rights. But to do that, we have to leave the ECHR. It has an article, Article 8, which means that what I've just suggested is not possible legally.
In this case and in others similar, the judge has to interpret the law. Does he or she not? And perhaps he could have gone in another direction, could have made a different decision based on the same information.
Probably not. My understanding in this case is that the judge acknowledged that this individual, whatever his name is, this Albanian national who's the burglar, that he actually waited until this child had been born before launching his appeal, because he was gaming the system. The judge acknowledged that, but there was nothing the judge could do about that because the law is pretty clear. If he's got a claim to, I mean, even then, in fact, in this case, the judge was minded to deport the individual, but then there were appeals launched on the basis of the mother, the wife of this individual, that she's got mental health issues and she's been through certain anxieties and stresses as well. So put all that together in the context of Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, and you have a no-win situation for the UK government, no matter how dangerous this individual may be to the British public. If he served his sentence, then the courts can do nothing. So that's the fundamental here. The court has taken upon itself the sort of ability to morph and develop the law in terms of, because it regards the convention not as a written document as such, but as a living document that constantly can be evolved by the decisions that the court makes. So they're sort of kind of making their law up as they go along and imposing it on the signatories to the convention. That's what's happened here. British government has no say in it.
And that's a change as well, because when this document was drawn up, and when we're consistently told this document was drawn up by Churchill and the likes of those that won the Second World War, it wasn't interpreted as a living document until the 1970s, well after that generation had passed on. But Henry Bolton, I'm afraid we've run to time. Thank you so much for joining us and talking through this issue. It's of deep concern to many, many people watching, I'm sure.
Yes, well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. What do you make of this? Should we scrap free prescriptions for 60 to 65-year-olds in England? Apparently, Rachel Reeves is being urged to do this to save some money.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom. It is just after 1:30. The top story from the newsroom this morning, the boss of MI5 says the rise in the number of children being investigated for terrorism in the UK is staggering and warned that online memes are drawing them into extreme ideologies. In a speech this morning, Ken McCallum revealed that 13% of those being investigated for terrorism are under the age of 18. That's a threefold increase in the past 3 years. He also warned that ISIS and al-Qaeda are on the rise again, with an increased terror risk linked to the conflict ongoing in the Middle East. In the US, 51 Florida counties are now under a state of emergency after what's being described as a monster hurricane named Milton sweeps ever closer to an already battered coast. In a news conference on that hurricane, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has just told people they need to prepare for the largest evacuation in years, warning that time is going to very shortly start running out. More than 200 healthcare facilities in the path of that storm have already been evacuated. And you can see here satellite images showing the storm churning through the Gulf of Mexico, with winds now recorded up to 150 miles an hour. Forecasters are also warning of an 8 to 12-foot storm surge possible. That would be the highest ever for the region and could bring widespread flooding. Well, it comes just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene claimed over 200 lives in the United States. Here, the race to lead the Conservative Party is now in its final stages, with just days left to decide the next opposition leader. 4 candidates are still battling it out: Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch, James Cleverly and Tom Tugendhat. But by tonight, one will be eliminated. Then, on Wednesday, the final 2 will be selected, leaving Conservative members to make the ultimate choice. This morning, we were joined by Shadow Minister for Education, Damien Heinz, and he said that there is a field of standout candidates to choose from. In other news, water companies in England and Wales have been ordered to return more than £157 million to customers for failing to meet crucial targets on pollution. Ofwat, the regulator, demanded the money comes off of bills for households and businesses over the next 2 years. It follows a previous order to repay £114 million last year. Well, with water bills set to rise by an average of 21% over the next 5 years, Ofwat says that financial penalties alone won't solve the industry's deep-rooted crisis. Meanwhile, some companies have made progress on leaks, though none have achieved the top rating. Damage to the brainstem might explain the frustrating symptoms some experience with long COVID, according to new research. In a pioneering study from the University of Cambridge, ultra-high-resolution MRI scanners uncovered long-lasting brain changes linked to inflammation in COVID-19 patients. The abnormalities were found in areas responsible for breathing control, they say, suggesting a potential link to extreme fatigue, breathlessness and mental health issues some patients experience. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. A full roundup at 2 o'clock. We will be back with Tom and Emily very shortly after this break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office on what could be quite a thundery Tuesday for some of us. Yes, there will be some sunny spells around, but also plenty of showers because low pressure is dominating the story, and this low pressure is leading to quite an unsettled, unstable picture across the UK at the moment. It's also bringing some blustery winds, especially in the southwest, but also some strong winds across northern parts of Scotland too. Otherwise, and there's going to be some persistent rain across parts of northern England and into southern Scotland, and then plenty of showers for many other areas, especially towards the south-southeast, where they could turn heavy and thundery. Temperatures are going to be a little bit on the high side for the time of year, highs of around 18 or 19 Celsius towards the south, a bit fresher further north. As we go through this evening, there will still be some heavy thundery downpours to watch out for, particularly across central southern parts of England and Wales. Could be some disruption. We do have a warning in force. Further north, something a little bit more persistent rain-wise across parts of perhaps Northern Ireland, but also northern England and southern Scotland. And then further north-northeast across Scotland, yes, it's going to still be quite windy, and there will be some further outbreaks of rain as we go through the end of the day. More unsettled wet weather to come for many of us as we go through the end of the day and overnight. The rain and showers starting to ease a little bit, so turning a bit dry as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning, but still some wet weather around. There will be some clear spells here and there, but largely cloudy. So towards the south in particular, it's going to be a relatively mild night, a little bit chillier though further north, with temperatures dropping mid-single figures for some. As we go through tomorrow, a bit of a wet start across eastern parts of Scotland, some parts of northeast England, and rain continuing here for a time, but it should break up and clear away later on. And otherwise, there'll be some showers around again, but they don't look like they'll be as frequent or as intense as the ones that we're going to see today. Temperatures still on the relatively warm side towards the south, but turning colder from the north with a northerly wind.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello to you, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Yorkshire firstly, on the northbound M1 at the Huddersfield turn-off junction 38. There's still 2 lanes are coned off for emergency bridge repairs, busy on the approach. On the southbound side of the M1, Barnsley south down towards Rotherham junction 36 to 35, well there's a breakdown there, so slow going past the scene, a lane closure has been put in place. The eastbound M4 Bath junction 18 to Chippenham 17 is seeing delays building, there's emergency barrier repairs ongoing, a lane closure in place. 2 lanes are coned off on the anti-clockwise M25. That's from junction 5, the M26 to Orpington at 4. That's an earlier overturned trailer and a collision there. There's a queue for 2 miles before junction 5. It's clear though on the clockwise side. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 39 minutes past 1. Now, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is being pressured to cut free prescriptions for those aged between 60 and 65.
Free subscription to Netflix.
Free subscriptions. I mean, it would be nice, wouldn't it? Free subscriptions.
It would be nice. I quite fancy watching the new Jilly Cooper film.
Oh, do you think you could get a free subscription? We're talking about prescriptions.
Prescriptions at the doctors when you're unwell and you need a prescription. Yes, they're thinking about axing them for 60 to 65-year-olds for free anyway. The Intergenerational Foundation charity says it could raise the Treasury up to £6 billion scrapping these free prescriptions. But would it be another blow to pensioners after many had their winter fuel payments stripped?
Well, joining us is the former head of health at the Office for National Statistics, Jamie Jenkins. Jamie, first of all, I'm struggling to understand how people could believe this would save £6 billion. I mean, the entire budget of the NHS is around £180 billion this year. I'm not sure that £6 billion of that is going on pensioners aged between 60 and 65's free prescriptions.
Yeah, good afternoon. I think it's a bit of a maths trick because I think the £6 billion comes from the savings over 10 years. So you're right to point out, Tom, that it's not a massive saving in 1 year. But I think what this does raise is potentially some kind of inconsistencies between Labour Party policy if they were to do this, because what you've got to consider is that in Wales, which the Welsh Labour Party run the NHS, there are free prescriptions for everybody. So regardless of your age, if you're 20, 30, 40, you get free prescriptions in Wales, whereas obviously in England, only certain groups are exempt. So if the Labour Party were to go down a road of, say, withdrawing some free prescriptions in England, there'll be a clamour to say, well, hang on now, how come people are having to get them free in Wales, but not in England? I think that's going to be the big tension for any Labour politician to do any tinkering of the prescription services in England.
Unfair, come to think of it, that if you happen to be in England, you have to pay for your prescriptions, but if you're in Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland, you get them free for life.
And I think that's part of the choice is obviously what devolution allows you to do. People in Wales would argue that free prescriptions is a bad thing to some people because they could be investing the money in other things. There's obviously a cost-benefit analysis when you're trying to weigh up, should you give free prescriptions? That, you know, if you offer free prescriptions for people who can pay, that's probably a bad use of money. But there'll be some people who may choose, well, I can't afford the prescription, so I'm not going to go and see the doctor to get a prescription for something. So you have a poorer health outcome there. But there clearly is some unfairness within the health system that, depending on where you live, you get a free prescription or not. And that's ultimately one of the challenges when you do have devolution and allow politicians to tinker with different policies, when ultimately people think of it as a national health service, but technically it's a postcode lottery.
That is a very, very good point. And I suppose one of the arguments there, perhaps, considering the health outcomes in Wales compared to health outcomes in England, ambulance waiting times in Wales compared to ambulance waiting times in England, very often it seems to be that Wales is lagging behind England. Do you think that could be because money that could have been invested in, you know, the physical infrastructure of the NHS instead has been giving wealthy people free prescriptions?
Well, those are the choices, Tom, people are making, and that will be a factor because obviously whatever you're investing on free prescriptions, you could be investing in other parts of the health service. It doesn't necessarily mean that that money is lost to the health service. You could be doing things in a different way, and waiting lists are worse in Wales. I think ultimately the challenge with free prescriptions for all is that it does tend to lead to overuse. So some people will just go to the doctor, get a prescription. They cost more money potentially than if you just go to the kind of the chemist yourself and get some stuff that you don't need a prescription for. So I think there's a challenge there. But going back to the original point on will Rachel Reeves look at this, I think ultimately it's a very small amount of money in the grand scheme of things per year. So I think, you know, we've got somebody calling for this. I cannot see this one happening because, as we say, if they were to do this in England, there'll be a clamour, well, hang on, you're going the opposite way to what you're doing in Wales, and there'll be some infight within the Labour Party.
Yeah, well, they've already had that over the winter fuel payments, so perhaps they're up for another fight. Jamie Jenkins, thank you very much, former head of health at the ONS Statistics. Lots of you have been getting in touch about this. General Cream Slight, I don't think that's your real name, is it? Making 60 to 65-year-olds pay prescription charges only in England, whilst the other home nations have them free, is a terrible idea. Debbie says, no, stop free prescriptions, full stop. £1 an item, affordable for all. Would that make up the money?
Well, I mean, one of the problems with having free prescriptions is that people get prescriptions that they don't need. They just go and stock up and it drains the system of these resources. If it's a trivial price, then you don't solve that problem.
No. Also, the NHS, do we always get drugs at a good price? I'm not always sure how good our negotiation skills are. Lots of you getting in touch. We'll read out some more of your views a little later on in the show. Sally says, why do healthy working 60-year-olds need free prescriptions?
Yeah.
I would insist on paying for mine as still earning a good wage at 62. Well, there's a view as well.
Yeah. So, and of course, I mean, 60-year-olds are not elderly, infirm people.
Age.
They're not pension. I mean, I would find it insulting.
But you're more likely to be on more, you know, prescriptions, aren't you? The older you get. Yeah, 60, yeah. Not everyone's as fighting fit as you.
I think most 60-year-olds are. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's programme, including we're talking about the Chagos Islands. Was it actually pressure from Biden that made us give up sovereignty? That next.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
A furious online debate has been sparked after, well, let's just say a rather large man, I mean, he really was big, was snapped trying to fit into his seat on a plane.
It's led to some to ask whether obese passengers should have to pay for extra plane seats so they don't inconvenience others.
Some say, though, that's cruel. So, should plus-size passengers pay extra for plane seats? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, who's in Stratford-upon-Avon, and the director of All About Obesity, Sarah LeBrock, who's in beautiful Harrogate. Good to see you both this morning. Sarah, what do you think?
Well, we've had this debate before with Steve and I, to be fair, and I think it's one of those things where planes are just not fit for purpose anymore. So people's bodies have been growing over the years. We know this, the obesity rates are increasing, etc. But what's happening to planes is the seats are decreasing in size. So they're just not fit for purpose and not fit for the population. So I think it's just one of these things where we need to be more empathetic to people, that they're trying to fit into an environment that isn't shaped for them at all. So I think we do need to kind of say, well, what's right here? Is it the person not being able to fit in the seat, or is it the seat not being fit for purpose for the person? And I think we need to really, you know, look at things from that perspective as well. Instead of thinking the person's doing something wrong, how about the environment might be doing something wrong?
Steve?
It's not about blaming, but the message you can't put out, in my opinion, is that it's okay to be obese and don't worry about it. You see, what I'm saying here is free plane seats. If you're offering free plane seats, an extra seat, that's going to normalise obesity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about.
Join me and my A-team of top pundits.
Chemistry tonight is electric.
As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 49 minutes past 1. Now, the UK's relationship with the United States was at risk if they didn't strike a deal for the Chagos Islands. Well, that's according to reports. Soon after their landslide victory in the general election, President Joe Biden pushed the Labour government to surrender the overseas territory to Mauritius, so it's claimed.
Yeah, so why on earth would they do this? Well, joining us to discuss this is former Conservative MP Colonel Bob Stewart. Thank you very much for joining us. Is this true? Do you believe that Joe Biden was behind this?
I've got no idea. But if he was, then shame on the government for giving in. We've given up a sovereign territory which is strategically important for our defence. And frankly, most Chagosians don't want us to give up that sovereignty. And then we're giving up this sovereignty and apparently we're paying money to give it up to Mauritius, that's deeply in hock to the Chinese and who could well allow the biggest maritime protection zone in the whole world be invaded by Chinese fishing vessels. These are all the threats, of course. But fundamentally, we've got a strategic asset here, which is sovereign territory, and we've given it up. And we're actually, apparently, paying money to give it up to Mauritius.
Is the issue here for the United States that they don't give a fig about British sovereignty over islands? They don't give a fig about all of the other islands in this archipelago. They only care about Diego Garcia, where the joint UK-US base is. And given there was this non-binding ruling from some international court saying that the UK must cede sovereignty over these islands, the Americans were so very keen to save Diego Garcia from any international ruling and stick by international judgments, that in their view, they didn't give a fig for British sovereignty. They thought they wanted to save the base, and so in order to do that, they engineered a deal where the Brits basically swap all of those islands for a 99-year lease on this military base.
Well, I don't know, but if we've got sovereign rights on it, it's up to us to decide. This Chagos, this Diego Garcia base is strategically very, very important in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Give it up to Mauritius, and I wonder how long it will be before you see Chinese airplanes landing there.
Is this done and dusted now? Is this just how it is? The Chagos Islands are no longer under our control. Surely there must be more process to this. It seemed to come out of nowhere.
You would think so, wouldn't you? You'd think the whole matter would be referred to Parliament, which is actually the final arbiter. You would think that the Chagosians, and there are large sections of them living around Crawley, for example. I was on the Chagosian all-party group until I stopped being in Parliament this summer. You'd think they'd be asked about this. But no, it seems to have been a high-handed decision, and actually shame on the Foreign Secretary for giving up something that's a strategic asset, a jewel, actually, in the middle of the Indian Ocean, which is crucially important to the defence of the West.
David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, yesterday before the House of Commons, stood at the dispatch box, stood at that dispatch box and said throughout this process the Chagosians had been consulted. They'd been spoken to throughout this negotiation. And then we learn that actually the Chagosians were told about 1 hour before the announcement was made. Do you think, Colonel Bob, that the Foreign Secretary has told a mistruth from the dispatch box?
Well, it seems like it. Well, technically, he said they've been informed throughout, well, for the last hour or so, may be the case. But frankly, they should have been involved in the whole process from the start, because after all, it's where they've come from and where they might want to go back to. The fact of the matter is that if this is the case, that the American president has forced this upon us, shame on the Foreign Secretary, because we should have more courage than that.
I mean, it would be ridiculous, wouldn't it, considering Joe Biden is going to be out of office very soon indeed. It would seem awfully silly. But Colonel Bob Stewart, thank you very much indeed for joining us, former Conservative MP. And Colonel, thank you very much. Just give in, just roll over.
I find it extraordinary, but I do wonder if this is the fate of this country, and has been since Suez, that, you know, we don't have an independent foreign policy. The Foreign Office will always look to the United States before we make a single decision. Is that the world we live in?
Well, that's what Richard says. To the US, we're just another country to be used and exploited. The Chagos Islands is just another example. Could that be true? We've got lots more coming up on today's show, including the news that MI5 have foiled more than 20 potentially deadly Iranian terror plots in this country. Stay with us.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office on what could be quite a thundery Tuesday for some of us. Yes, there will be some sunny spells around, but also plenty of showers because low pressure is dominating the story, and this low pressure is leading to quite an unsettled, unstable picture across the UK at the moment. It's also bringing some blustery winds, especially in the southwest, but also some strong winds across northern parts of Scotland too. Otherwise, and there's going to be some persistent rain across parts of northern England and into southern Scotland, and then plenty of showers for many other areas, especially towards the south-southeast, where they could turn heavy and thundery. Temperatures are going to be a little bit on the high side for the time of year, highs of around 18 or 19 Celsius towards the south, a bit fresher further north. As we go through this evening, there will still be some heavy thundery downpours to watch out for, particularly across central southern parts of England and Wales. Could be some disruption. We do have a warning in force. Further north, something a little bit more persistent rain-wise across parts of perhaps Northern Ireland, but also northern England and southern Scotland. And then further north-northeast across Scotland, yes, it's going to still be quite windy, and there will be some further outbreaks of rain as we go through the end of the day. More unsettled wet weather to come for many of us as we go through the end of the day and overnight. The rain and showers starting to ease a little bit, so turning a bit dry as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning, but still some wet weather around. There will be some clear spells here and there, but largely cloudy, so towards the south in particular it's going to be a relatively mild night, a little bit chillier though further north, with temperatures dropping mid-single figures for some. As we go through tomorrow, a bit of a wet start across eastern parts of Scotland, some parts of northeast England, and rain continuing here for a time, but it should break up and clear away later on. And otherwise there'll be some showers around again, but they don't look like they'll be as frequent or as intense as the ones that we're going to see today. Temperatures still on the relatively warm side towards the south, but turning colder from the north with a northerly wind.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 8th of October. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carter.
UK terror risk increased. MI5 have foiled more than 20 deadly Iranian terror plots in the UK in the last 2 years. And the agency is now warning of an increased terror risk due to conflict in the Middle East.
Police racism worries white police officers are hesitating when dealing with ethnic minorities over fears they could be investigated on the grounds of racism. We'll bring you that exclusive next.
It's a knockout. 4 will become 3 today as Conservative MPs dump another leadership contender this very afternoon. We'd all been led to think that groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS had been beaten back, that they were a thing of the past, that we weren't at risk of any large-scale terror attacks these days. But we only need to look at actually the number of attempts, and some successful, in the last few years. I think that sort of broad narrative that these groups are much, much smaller than they once were doesn't mean that they're any less threatening.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that we've foiled, well, the MI5 have foiled 20 potentially deadly attacks from Iran, just Iran, is absolutely quite incredible. 43 terror plots have been foiled. These included bomb threats to kill thousands of people, 20 schemes backed by Iran. This all in a matter of years. I mean, if those had gone ahead, it would have been absolutely devastating, but it just shows how big that threat is, consistently.
Absolutely, and as the IRA used to say, they only have to be lucky once. I mean, it seems that our security services are very good, but let's not discount the amount of luck that also needs to be applied here. We need to be lucky every single time.
Yeah, this Director General pointing out that we face not only these threats from Islamic extremists, also Russia, Iran, China. Surely our defence budget now needs to go up.
You'd think, but I don't think the government's committed to that.
Well,
they say
await the budget.
They say it's an ambition rather than a commitment.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel safe? I mean, is it just a matter of time? I don't want to, fearmonger, but is it just a matter of time before we see a large-scale terror attack in this country? I mean, we rely on these services to foil these attempts.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we had some large-scale attacks. Back in 2017, we'll all remember the Manchester Arena bombing, the London Bridge attack, the Westminster Bridge attack. They sort of came in a flurry. I don't know if our security services have got better, but clearly it's an unusual press conference with the Director General of MI5 releasing this information today publicly. There used to be a time when we weren't allowed to know even the name of the Director General of MI5, but now this is a sort of PR push to show that they are on the case. Is this meant to reassure us? Does it reassure you? Well, contact us at gbnews.com/yoursay. But all that to come and so much more after your latest news headlines.
Tom, Emily, thank you very much. Good afternoon to you. It is 3 minutes past 2. The top story from the newsroom. The boss of MI5 has warned that Russia is on a mission to create what he's called mayhem in the UK and on European streets. Ken McCullum says Britain is now facing an increased threat from Putin's henchmen and plot after plot, he said, from Iran. Since 2017, MI5 has disrupted 43 late-stage terrorist plots, with some of those planning mass murder. Well, in his wide-ranging speech, McCullum also revealed a growing number of children are being investigated for terrorism in the UK. And it comes as Islamic terrorism is also on the rise again, with the biggest threat, MI5 say, from Al-Qaeda and in particular from Islamic State, due to the conflict in the Middle East. And Israel has launched operations in southwestern Lebanon, but says they are limited, localised and targeted at this stage. The strikes come less than 24 hours after the anniversary of Hamas attacks in Israel on October the 7th, and after Israel killed a key Hezbollah commander in Beirut. Meanwhile, evacuations are still taking place in the Lebanese capital as 400,000 people have so far fled, seeking safety across the Middle East amid growing fears of a wider conflict there. We now know over 1,400 people have been killed in Lebanon so far, while the death toll in Gaza is now close to 42,000 people. And just a quick bit of breaking news for you. We can bring you the details from Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant. He says that it appears the replacement of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, who was himself, of course, assassinated, has also been eliminated. That, according to Yoav Gallant, Israeli Defence Minister. He was a top Hezbollah official, widely expected to take on that top job after Nasrallah's death. But it wasn't confirmed whether he was indeed dead or alive. Still unconfirmed at this stage by Hezbollah itself. But at this stage, as I say, it appears Israel are confirming he is indeed dead. Hashem Safieddine, that is the top Hezbollah official expected to take over from Hassan Nasrallah. Well, in other news, Keir Starmer is set for a crucial talk in Berlin this weekend, joining leaders from the US, from France and Germany. That meeting will focus on the ongoing war in the Middle East and, of course, in Ukraine too. It comes as tensions are rising in Lebanon, prompting urgent diplomatic efforts among that so-called Quad nation. The Prime Minister's spokesperson says the meeting will highlight the UK's commitment to tackling international issues alongside its allies. Back to news here at home, and the race to lead the Conservative Party is in its final stages, with just days left to decide the next opposition leader. 4 candidates are still battling it out: Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch, James Cleverly and Tom Tugendhat. But by tonight, one will be eliminated. Then tomorrow, the final 2 will be selected, leaving Conservative members to make the ultimate choice. This morning, we were joined on breakfast by Shadow Minister of Education, Damien Heinz, and he told us that there is a field of 4 standout candidates.
We've not made a declaration. I think we've got 4 really strong candidates. Obviously, we've got a round today, another round tomorrow, and then there'll be the members round. I took a decision at the start of the contest not to make a declaration until we got to that final stage. But I think it's been a very well contested election. Obviously, at the party conference last week, that was a really important opportunity for people to set out their stall, and I think both party members and, of course, the wider public got a chance to see all 4 of them in action.
In the US, 51 Florida counties are now under a state of emergency. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has been telling people they need to prepare for the largest evacuation in years, warning that time for them is going to start running out very soon. You can see here pictures live of a Florida highway. It appears at this stage traffic moving relatively freely, although, as you can tell there, all moving in seemingly one direction, and that would, of course, be away from the path of the incoming Hurricane Milton. Satellite images have also been showing the storm churning through the Gulf of Mexico, with winds now reaching 150 miles an hour, and forecasters warning of a storm surge up to 12 feet. That would be the highest ever for the region and could bring widespread flooding. Well, it comes just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene claimed over 200 lives in the southeast of the United States. Staying in the United States, Donald Trump marked the one-year anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel, calling it a nightmare. Speaking to a packed ballroom at his Miami golf club, the former president addressed a group of supporters, blaming the rise of anti-Semitism in the US on the Democratic Party.
A lot of that has to do with the leadership of this country. This attack, the October 7th attack, would never have happened if I was president. I can tell you.
Well, with just 29 days left until the US election, Kamala Harris has been facing questions on critical issues, including the Middle East, in a one-on-one interview with CBS News. Amid growing criticism over her limited media appearances, the Vice President addressed topics like Ukraine, gun ownership and immigration. But in one tense moment, she refused to call the Israeli Prime Minister a strong ally of the United States.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Right, it's 2:09, and let's bring you some more on the breaking news that MI5 have foiled more than 20 deadly Iranian terror plots on the UK in the past 2 years.
Yes, MI5 is now warning the country is under an increased Islamist terror threat due to tensions in the Middle East, not just from Iran, but from a resurgent ISIS and Al-Qaeda too.
Yes, well, joining us now with the latest is our Home and Security editor, Mark White. A very worrying picture is being painted.
Yeah, MI5 and police counter-terrorism officers have never been busier for a very long period of time now. And it's certainly the threats they're facing are the most complex they have ever been, ranging from those organised terror groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, now resurgent in their ambitions to launch deadly attacks, but also the lone actors who get inspired by these organised terror groups, and then the state actors, the countries like Iran and Russia who are getting involved increasingly in launching attacks in the West as well. As far as the Middle East is concerned, some very real concern from Ken McCallum, the Director General of MI5, that ISIS in particular has bounced back from being pummeled, as we know, for years by the Western coalition in Syria and in Iraq. And they are now launching deadly attacks. We saw the Moscow theatre attack in which 145 people were killed and 500 others were injured. And those attacks that they don't carry out directly, they are inspiring others, as I say. But with regard to the threat from the conflict in the Middle East, this is what Ken McCallum said.
Today we are powerfully alive to the risk that events in the Middle East directly trigger terrorist action in the UK, as we saw with last October's knife attack in Hartlepool. The ripples from conflict in that region will not necessarily arrive at our shores in a straightforward fashion. They'll be filtered through the lens of online media and mixed with existing views and grievances in unpredictable ways.
And one of the real concerns that they have is not just Al-Qaeda and ISIS again rising and posing this threat, but it's alongside the likes of the state actors. We see with Iran, of course, Israel now really taking the fight to its proxies, having largely dismantled Hamas in Gaza, now going after Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. And, of course, about, we believe, to launch a significant attack on Iran for the ballistic missile attack that Iran launched on Israel last week. And so there is real concern that Iran, through its proxies, may well target Israeli, Jewish, even just Western interests in the UK. And speaking to that, Ken McCallum spoke already about the number of plots that directly link back to the Iranian state.
Since January 2022, with police partners, we have responded to 20 Iran-backed plots presenting potentially lethal threats to British citizens and UK residents. As events unfold in the Middle East, we will give our fullest attention to the risk of an increase in or a broadening of Iranian state aggression here in the UK.
Now, we have seen quite a few Lone Ranger attacks, an Islamist with a knife who tries to harm as many people as he can in the vicinity on a smaller scale. When we talk about 20 Iranian-backed terror plots that have been foiled, could that have been very large-scale bomb-type attacks, like we've seen, unfortunately, in this country in previous years?
Well, we certainly believe they were, some of them at least, attacks that planned to disrupt and harm to a very significant extent those involved in the likes of the Iranian international channel that broadcasts, of course, messages of freedom to the people of Iran, dissidents that are seen by Iran as enemies of the state. But the concern is it will widen in its scope to not just include those.
Certainly they wouldn't hold a press conference like this. Why do you think that's changed, and why now? Why are we hearing from them now?
Well, to be fair, it changed quite a few years ago. There was a period where the security services, and we hear sometimes as well from the head of MI6, they felt they needed to be seen and to be more accountable and to articulate the very real threats and challenges that they face in trying to keep us safe. And the fact is, our security services are lucky, or not lucky, but very skillful in the sense that they manage to thwart the vast majority of these threats and attacks that are being planned against us. And we don't hear about them very often, except when individuals like Ken McCallum get up there to articulate just the level of threat that this country faces. But as the old adage goes, you know, from the times of the IRA, we only need to be lucky once. And of course, we know the terrorists in the past have had a few successes.
It does seem that this is a sort of check our progress, bank our progress, because they can't guarantee that something won't get through perhaps in the near future. It's a troubling thought, but Mark White, thank you so much for bringing us up to date with all of that news.
Thank you very much. Well, later today, about now, I think the voting is going on, is it not?
Voting has started.
Yes, this is the Conservative leadership race being whittled down from 4 to 3 contenders.
Yes, Robert Jenrick and James Cleverly are believed to be the front-runners at the moment, with the former Immigration Minister Jenrick having the most public backers.
However, James Cleverly, who is Shadow Home Secretary, he appears to be gaining a bit of momentum. He did quite well at the Conservative Party conference, quite a few Conservatives thought.
Meanwhile, the turmoil engulfing the government seems to be showing no sign of abating, with a new poll showing that Labour is now just 1 point ahead of the Conservatives. Perhaps they shouldn't elect a new leader after all. With no leader, they seem to be doing rather well.
Just 3 months after a landslide victory to be just 1 point behind the Conservatives, who don't even have a proper leader at the moment.
It's margin of error stuff.
Yeah. Shall we speak to GBNews political editor Christopher Hope? Christopher, you are outside number 10. Fantastic stuff. We have this Conservative leadership contest ongoing. Is the voting now currently happening?
Hi, Emily. Hi, Tom. Yeah, it's an overcast number 10 Downing Street, where I've been here for the cabinet meeting earlier, but shortly the action moves quite rapidly to Parliament, where Tory MPs are voting right now on the new leader to replace Rishi Sunak. Voting starts at 1:30 p.m. It should be all over by 3 p.m. Announcement by Bob Blackman, the 1922 chairman, at 3:30 p.m. It doesn't take long, frankly, to count 119 MPs anymore. So in the old days, it would take 2 or 3 hours to do this exercise. You can do it in the blink of an eye, basically. We're expecting Robert Jenrick to tick up slightly to around 34, 35 MPs. Most of the MPs that supported Mel Stride in the last round of voting before the party conference, 16 of those votes, they are probably going to go towards Jenrick and James Cleverly, who should get a big jump in his popularity. He's around 21 MPs supporting. So we're expecting, I think, Tom Tugendhat to drop out today, and overnight a battle for second place between Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch, and then the final two, whoever they are, announced in just over 24 hours' time to go forward to the membership. So, as you say, those polling numbers are disastrous for the Labour Party, and they've happened without any actual meaningful, real opposition from the leader of the opposition, because he basically hasn't been around that much. Rishi Sunak will be around in PMQs tomorrow, but I think should be, and one more or two more after that. But really, the problems for Labour have happened without any real opposing by the Tory party.
Christopher, that is to some extent why there's been more focus on the government. Of course, there should be more focus on a government. The government are in power, the opposition are not. But the fact that there isn't a lightning rod leading the Tories to whom the media can go, oh, well, you did this in government. It's more amorphous. And therefore, all of the Labour Party's claims that, oh, yes, we're accepting freebies or there's some sleazy appearances here, but look at the other lot, doesn't seem to work so well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I hadn't thought of that. Of course, you could be right there. I mean, James Cleverly, for example, last night, was not in that Chagos statement to MPs. He was a former Foreign Secretary. The current Shadow Foreign Secretary is Andrew Mitchell, so he answered on behalf of the government. But James Cleverly, he kick-started those talks when Liz Truss was Prime Minister back in September 2022, and he wasn't around, didn't have to be around, fair enough. Tom Tugendhat was there for sure, calling out the Labour position on the Chagos Islands and the sovereignty being passed to Mauritius. But it might well be that it's like kind of like jelly trying to nail it to the wall. You can't really get a handle on the Tories, so it's been hard for the Labour to push back against them. That could well be the case.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed. Christopher Hope, GBNews political editor, there outside number 10, a big day for the Conservatives. I don't know, I mean, I take your point that, yes, there hasn't been a proper leader of the Conservative Party to sort of chuck things at.
Yeah.
But you have had 4 leadership contenders sort of saying all sorts of things.
Yes,
that you can go at. I mean, how many gaffes have there been over the course of this leadership contest? You've had Kemi Badenoch all over the press over her comments about maternity pay. You've had Jenrick saying all sorts about the SAS and things.
Yes.
You know, there have been things to go at.
Yes, but because none of them are leader, you can't really. No one's going to put that on the front page.
Not the same accountability.
Although, I mean, perhaps we're reading too much into it. Perhaps it's that the Conservative Party simply don't matter that much anymore. There are only 121 of them in Parliament. They are the smallest they have ever been since the party was founded in 1834 in terms of their scale in Parliament. And the Labour Party is just completely dominant of all of our politics. So perhaps it's right that everything looks at what Labour does. They are the government. They will be the government for a full parliamentary term.
I think that might be it.
They might need to get used to it.
I think that might be it. But I also think, how much scrutiny did Keir Starmer get as leader of the opposition? Did he get enough? Did people know exactly, you know, what was coming up if they voted Labour necessarily?
And were journalists too quick to sort of skate over the sums where the Labour manifesto said we're not going to raise any taxes, but expected to sort of believe that there would be more investment or that there would be no extra investment? They wouldn't settle any of the pay disputes, for example. That wasn't budgeted for in the manifesto. I mean, there were loads of holes in that manifesto.
I mean, we tried to pin them down so many times, whoever we had.
The number of times we asked about capital gains tax, we asked about where are you not going to settle... Is there going to be no new money to settle junior doctors because you haven't put any funding for that, any routes for that in the manifesto costings document? I mean, there were all of these questions.
They wouldn't reveal basically anything about the tax regime, would
no.
they? I remember one interview with Emily Thornberry. She could not be pinned down on anything at all. Yvette Cooper couldn't be pinned down on when it came to what's going on with the boats, what exactly her plan was to stop them. It was all rather vague, but that served them. Vague. That served them in the election.
Maybe that's what you get afforded if you're the opposition. You don't have to present full-blooded, full-fat policy.
Full-fat. Full-fat policy. Well, we've got lots more coming up on today's show. We have an exclusive from Charlie Peters. This over the claim that apparently white officers are a bit worried about dealing with ethnic minorities, and perhaps this is become a problem when it comes to policing. We'll reveal all next.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
So I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm going to see your show, Behind the Shoulder Pads, one night only at the Adelphi Theatre, October the 22nd. You're talking about your extraordinary life. Stage, screen, published author, 19 books, TV, most important.
Yeah.
Is there anyone who's managed to straddle, 7, 8 decades in showbiz and still be at the top?
Yes, I was thinking about that the other day because somebody said, you know, with the last of good. There is Shirley MacLaine.
Sure.
She started the same time as me.
Right.
Sophia Loren.
Yeah.
She started around the same time.
She's not working much, though.
It's true, she's not, but she's still out there being, you know, a major icon. And of course, people like Dick Van Dyke, who's just almost 100.
Yeah, he's incredible,
you know,
isn't he?
I'm a mere babe next to him.
You are. But and I was thinking about, you've written some extraordinary, wicked, waspish diaries, which of course you can because you've worked with so many people. Look at the names: Frank Sinatra, Lana Turner, Elizabeth Taylor, Dean Martin, Gregory Peck,
Richard Burton,
Paul Newman. The list goes on and on. And
my favourite.
Was he your favourite?
Yes.
Why?
Because I saw him in a movie when I was a little girl called For Me and My Gal with Judy Garland, and I just fell in love with him. It's such a cute movie. Well, they don't make movies like that anymore. And then I was lucky enough when I first went to Hollywood at age 20 to meet him and literally hang out with him and his friends. And then I put him in a movie with me that I produced. He played my husband in a movie called Sins. And he was wonderful. He was really wonderful.
The People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, 2:26 is the time. Now, the chairman of Metropolitan Police Federation has said that white officers hesitate when dealing with ethnic minorities over the fear that they could be investigated on the grounds of racism.
Yes, Rick Pryor spoke to GB News exclusively, saying that racism of low expectation means that the Met does not criticise bad behaviour. OK,
well, we're joined by GB News national reporter Charlie Peters. Charlie, can this be true, that white police officers are hesitating to such a degree when it comes to ethnic minorities? That is something that someone like this has to note.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've yet to be told by a police officer, and I speak to several, that this isn't the case. And Rick Pryor has made quite a strident intervention with these comments, and it comes on the back of a couple of investigations by the Office for Police Conduct. And they've been overturned in two quite key cases. And in one, which was 4 years ago, 2 Olympic sprinters were stopped and searched, driving in central London. That took 4 years to be overturned. And the Police Appeals Tribunal described the investigation and the original findings by the panel that originally found the officers to be in disgrace as irrational and a decision it couldn't understand. That's now been overturned after 4 years of a complaint procedure to go through. And another example, which Rick and I spoke about at length last night, was about this incident in Croydon in South London last year, where a police officer was working with a revenue protection team supporting the TfL on the buses. And he asked a lady coming off the bus to see her Oyster card to prove that she's had paid her fare, and she refused. It escalated. He arrested her, and he was then convicted of assault by a judge at Westminster Magistrates Court. Last week, that conviction was overturned. The Met was grateful. But in its statement about it, the Met said that the case had divided opinion and that the black community had been upset by this situation. Now, what Rick is telling me about this racism of low expectations, he says that the Met is too shy to criticise poor behaviour by members of the public if they come from an ethnic minority background for fear of upsetting communities. And I actually spoke to him this morning on air about that. I think we have a clip we can show you now.
And the behaviour of certain individuals clearly falls below that of which society expects. I think it's incumbent on police leaders to support their officers who are charged with dealing with these type of incidents to come out and call out that behaviour. And I mean, the example of which I relate this to was the recent Croydon bus incident matter, where it was clear that the lady in question behaved poorly. It's a quite reasonable expectation of society that if you travel on transport, London transport, on the buses, the trains, you know that if you are asked to produce a valid ticket for travel, you show that ticket. Had that happened in this case, there would have been no incident. And so it was the behaviour of the lady in question that instigated the whole matter.
It seems that this is the case that we hear over and over again. The same with this lady on the bus, the same with the Olympians who were stopped. They were obviously stopped after that car was chased for a considerable amount of time because it refused to stop for the police car. It's a difficult issue here because clearly there is an issue of trust amongst the black community in particular and the police. Less willing to stop if the police say stop, less willing to cooperate if the police want you to cooperate. And that then breeds more distrust. I mean, the circle has to be broken at some stage. How?
Well, Rick Pryor, he represents 30,000 police officers in London. He says that circle should be broken by trusting police officers and backing them in the lawful execution of their duties. He says all too often, police officers who want to apply the law fairly and accurately to all people, regardless of background, are not doing so because they fear vexatious and malicious political witch hunt investigations into their lives. And those investigations can ruin their careers, that's a given, but also their mortgages and their marriages and their wider lives. If you're a young constable with a family, why would you go out and take that risk? Indeed, the Met seems to, in a sense, agree with Rick Pryor's assessment because they no longer support TfL revenue protection teams ever since this incident in Croydon in South London. It's been quietly announced, it just doesn't happen anymore. If they call up, they'll get a bobby to react in good time, but they're no longer attached to them. That's what Rick Pryor told me last night.
But what Rick Pryor is saying, how does that stack up with the claims that the police are institutionally racist? We've seen reports into the police claiming that. So on the one hand, you've got potentially issues of racism within the police, but then also white officers being so hesitant to deal with ethnic minorities for fear of being called racist. Can both of those things be true at the same time?
Well, the Met's never accepted the branding that they are institutionally racist, and I've personally never spoken to a police officer who thinks that that claim has merit, and I've spoken to hundreds over the last few years in this job. And several police forces across England and Wales, and indeed Police Scotland, have made that concession, but the Met is refusing to do so. I think a lot of officers are reassured by that, but at the same time, they do want the Met to go further, to do, as Rick says, call out bad behaviour, to back the police officers who are making those controversial interceptions when they are needed to do so.
It's such a tricky issue, isn't it? Because there clearly was racism in the Metropolitan Police in the 1980s. Clearly things are a lot better now, but that distrust between certain communities and the police still exists, and then the effects of that ricochet and you get these escalating incidents that then put the police at risk and all these tribunals. It's a mess. It's
very
a total and utter mess.
Police. Very difficult for the police to understand all the community tensions as well that are at play often. Charlie Peters, thank you very much. GBNews national reporter for bringing us that exclusive from the police.
Now, we must say that Andy George, the president of the National Black Police Association, has told GBNews this. There have been many seminal reports into the racism that black communities suffer at the hands of Met officers in London over many years. It is ridiculous that Rick Pryor and others should try to use a small number of high-profile cases to delegitimise the evidence found in many reports.
The Met Police is in a crisis of its own making, and it is disappointing that while scrutiny should be rightly applied, given the tragic murder of Sarah Everard, people like Rick Pryor are pushing back on this accountability. OK, make of that what you will. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Have you seen shocking footage from Florida? A hurricane is incoming. People are being forced to evacuate. That's after the news headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. It is just after 2:30. The top stories from the newsroom this afternoon. The Director General of MI5 has warned that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are on the rise again, with an increased terror risk linked to the conflicts ongoing in the Middle East. In a stark warning today at the Counter-Terrorism Operations Centre, Ken McCallum revealed that Iran has been linked to at least 20 deadly plots in the UK over the past 2 years. He says both groups are attempting to export terror, highlighting the recent deadly attack in Moscow as a brutal demonstration of what ISIS is capable of. As the conflict between Israel and Iran intensifies, MI5 is now on high alert for potential domestic repercussions. McCallum also pointed to a worrying rise in state-sponsored threats, particularly, he said, from Russia. In the US, 51 Florida counties are now under a state of emergency as what's being described as a monster hurricane named Milton sweeps ever closer to an already battered Florida coast. The governor, Ron DeSantis, has told people they should prepare for the largest evacuation in years, warning that time is soon going to start running out. You can see there live pictures of the evacuation underway on a Florida highway. Seems at this stage to be moving relatively freely, though they are, of course, moving in one direction, and that would be, of course, in the direction out of the path of that hurricane as evacuations continue. More than 200 healthcare facilities in the path of the storm have so far been evacuated, and we've just heard that ports across the whole of Florida are now also closed to vessels, according to the US Coast Guard. Forecasters are warning of storm surges up to 12 feet. That would be the highest ever for the region. It comes as 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene claimed over 200 lives in the southeast of the United States. Here, Conservative MPs are now voting in the latest stage of the race to replace Rishi Sunak. 4 candidates are battling it out: Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch, James Cleverly and Tom Tugendhat, but soon one will be eliminated. We're expecting the results from that vote at around 3:30. We will, of course, bring that straight to you when we have that result. Tomorrow, though, the final 2 will then be selected, leaving Conservative members to make the ultimate choice. Water companies in England and in Wales have been ordered to return more than £157 million to customers for failing to meet crucial targets on pollution. Ofwat has demanded the money comes off of bills for households and businesses in the next 2 years. It follows a previous order to repay £114 million last year. Well, with water bills set to rise by an average of 21% over the next 5 years, Ofwat says that financial penalties alone won't solve the industry's deep crisis. And the UK population has seen its largest annual increase in size since 1971. The Office for National Statistics estimates the total population grew by 1% in just a year, reaching 68.3 million by mid-2023. That covers England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The ONS says migration was the main factor behind the latest rise, with deaths exceeding births by around 16,300 in the same period. That's it from me for now. Lewis Mackenzie will be here with a full roundup at 3 o'clock. Tom and Emily up next, but first, a quick break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office on what could be quite a thundery Tuesday for some of us. Yes, there will be some sunny spells around, but also plenty of showers because low pressure is dominating the story, and this low pressure is leading to quite an unsettled, unstable picture across the UK at the moment. It's also bringing some blustery winds, especially in the southwest, but also some strong winds across northern parts of Scotland too. Otherwise, and there's going to be some persistent rain across parts parts of northern England and into southern Scotland, and then plenty of showers for many other areas, especially towards the south-southeast, where they could turn heavy and thundery. Temperatures are going to be a little bit on the high side for the time of year, highs of around 18 or 19 Celsius towards the south, a bit fresher further north. As we go through this evening, there will still be some heavy thundery downpours to watch out for, particularly across central southern parts of England and Wales. Could be some disruption. We do have a warning in force. Further north, something a little bit more persistent rain-wise across parts of perhaps Northern Ireland, but also northern England and southern Scotland. And then further north-northeast across Scotland, yes, it's going to still be quite windy, and there will be some further outbreaks of rain as we go through the end of the day. More unsettled wet weather to come for many of us as we go through the end of the day and overnight. The rain and showers starting to ease a little bit, so turning a bit dry as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning, but still some wet weather around. There will be some clear spells here and there, but largely cloudy, so towards the south in particular it's going to be a relatively mild night, a little bit chillier though further north, with temperatures dropping mid-single figures for some. As we go through tomorrow, a bit of a wet start across eastern parts of Scotland, some parts of northeast England, and rain continuing here for a time, but it should break up and clear away later on. And otherwise there'll be some showers around again, but they don't look like they'll be as frequent or as intense as the ones that we're going to see today. Temperatures still on the relatively warm side towards the south, but turning colder from the north with a northerly wind.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello again, I'm Jules Buckley. The northbound M1 still has two lanes combed off at the Huddersfield turn-off junction 38 as the emergency bridge repairs there continue, so looking busy as you might expect. Slow either side of the M5 in Somerset around Taunton at junction 25. Lane 3 is combed off either side of the carriageway, and north and southbound again there's emergency repairs underway, so slow going in both directions. A couple of westbound M4 issues, firstly before 17 for Chippenham. Lane 1's combed off, a single vehicle collision causing delays. Also westbound Maidenhead 8 and 9 to Woking and Bracknell 10, so that's closed and queuing at the scene of a serious collision. And two lanes shut anti-clock M25 from junction 5 to Orpington at 4, a 4-mile queue back to junction 5, that's due to a previous collision. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
OK, 2:40 is the time. Coming up next after our show is Martin Dobney. He's up at 3. Martin, what have you got on your menu for us then?
Well, in around about an hour's time, we'll find out. Then there were 3. Who will be the final trio for the Tory leadership? Will they play it safe and go back towards the centre? James Cleverly, currently the bookies' favourite, or would it be Robert Jenrick, lurch towards the right in what seems to be a Reform Tribute Act? Will long shot Tom Tugendhat drop out? Where will those votes go? All to play for in about an hour's time. We'll have the full results on that as it comes in. Plus, we'll have an emotional interview with their brother. His brother was taken hostage by Hamas a year ago yesterday at the Nova Music Festival. He's travelled the world, spoken with 50 foreign ministers and presidents. He's even prayed with the Pope for the return of his brother. We'll talk to him about his tireless quest for the liberty of his brother. And students, it takes him 3 hours to read a book, apparently. Well, I'll be joined by a bloke who sold quite a few books, 320 million books, in fact, Sir Geoffrey Archer. What will he have to say about the terminal decline, it seems, of human intelligence? That's all coming 3 till 6.
Oh, absolutely fascinating. We were discussing reading books earlier, whether we've read a long book recently. I could only come up with political biographies.
Yeah, he needs political biography. I read rather a nice novel the other day, but I can't remember what it was called. But yes, it's a bit worrying that literature undergrads can't read books in less than 3 weeks. Anyway, Martin, thank you very much. We look forward to your show.
Yeah, we'll be tuning in 3:30 for that result. But in other news, a study has revealed that more than 1 in 5 job candidates over the age of 50 fail to mention their age on CVs to avoid being stereotyped.
Yes, apparently if you're over the age of 57, you're now considered too old. Can that be true?
Well, joining us now is the founder of Pro-Fin Property Recruitment, Sally Asling. Sally, thank you so much for joining us. How do we find out that such a high proportion of people over that age simply don't put it on their CVs?
I can understand why. I'm a specialist in the recruitment
industry for the property sector. And as you know, recent shows on TV like Meghan Mansion Hunters and Selling Sunsets all glamorise the property industry. So people think it is such a young person, a sort of sexy young person's career. And actually the nitty-gritty opposite is true. And so many brilliant people are actually in their 50s and early 60s, and they have so much to offer. We're dealing with an industry in lettings where there's over 170 pieces of lettings legislation. So you could have anything from a call coming in about a tenant who's got bed bugs through to a complex lease. And that means you need a lot of experience in life to be able to be empathetic, sympathetic, and deal with these situations properly. And in my experience, that kicks in your sort of 50s and sometimes your 60s. And so it's not actually that uncommon to want to seek that expertise and experience out.
I mean, to write off people at the age of 57 is just ridiculous. I mean, people are younger than ever, aren't they? A lot of people anyway. And experience is almost priceless in some industries. It's just such a shame that people are having to hide their age now. What should older people do? I mean, I feel a bit harsh saying older people. I guess middle-aged people, what should they do if they're made redundant or they've been looking for a job for so long? Should they start removing experience from their CV that shows they're of an older age? I mean, is it as bad as that?
No, I think, but it is really important that CVs aren't cluttered with so many jobs and so many different things. I'm a big advocate in tailor your CV for the job that you're going to go for the interview for or to apply for, and then really enhance the experience that you've got in that sector, leaving the trail of goodness knows how many jobs off the CV because it's not relevant. What is relevant is your experience and your expertise for the job you're applying for.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, Sally Asling, thank you so much for joining us and talking through what is a fairly concerning story.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of ageism. I absolutely do. I remember when we were talking about something similar a few months ago, people getting in touch saying, I've been looking for a job for ages, was made redundant, now I'm considered too old. I think it's very much a real issue. Anyway, we're going to go to the United States because 51 Florida counties are now under a state of emergency in what's being described as a monster hurricane that's sweeping closer to the already battered coast.
Yeah, really dramatic, this. In a news conference on Milton, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has told people should prepare for the largest evacuation in years, warning that time is going to start running out very soon.
Yeah, it's quite the warning to the people of Florida. More than 200 healthcare facilities in the path of the storm have already been evacuated. Satellite images here show the storm churning through the Gulf of Mexico. Winds are being recorded up to 150 miles an hour. Forecasters are warning of an 8 to 12-foot storm surge, the highest ever for the region, and also widespread flooding to come as well.
And of course, this all comes just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene claimed over 200 lives in the United States.
Well, joining us now is a resident in Florida, Dan Cuesta. Dan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. This is very, very worrying. Everyone being told essentially get out of the area as quickly as possible.
Yeah, we're actually in one of those areas where they're telling us a mandatory evacuation to get out because this is going to be one of the worst storms to ever hit Tampa Bay in 100 years.
That is extraordinary. We've seen some of the footage of queues, traffic jams, real trouble for people trying to leave, fuel shortages in some areas. How is it where you are?
Yeah, we're experiencing the same things. We actually live, really close to Tampa Bay Tropicana, and there's just cots and there's emergency vehicles everywhere. Just lots of people that are preparing for the absolute worst disaster that could possibly ever hit Tampa Bay in 100 years.
Yeah,
so it's really terrifying. Yeah.
I'm reading that the population of the area is 3.3 million. I mean, for all of those people to take to the highway and try and leave the area as quickly as possible, I mean, it's going to be absolute gridlock, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, it's been gridlock. We've been trying to think of, a time that's going to be good for us to leave. So we have me, myself, or me and my girl, and our 3 animals. And we've been trying to find locations, in neighboring states of where we can go. And then they're all booking up really fast. So it's been terrifying, not only where, we have to leave here, but being able to go to a state that's going to actually take us in, because just everybody is fleeing Florida. So it's really terrifying, with everything that's happening right now, and then not having options of where to go.
Certainly. And Dan, just lastly, I mean, you haven't left yet, am I right? I mean, time is running out. When are you going to leave?
Yeah, we haven't left yet. We're still monitoring the situation on when to leave, when's going to be the best time. We were looking at it the past couple of days, and they were just gridlocked everywhere. So the storm is supposed to hit us right around Wednesday evening. So we still have about 32 hours left in order to leave. So we still think we have some time. But if you are here in the Tampa Bay area, Clearwater, Fort Myers, and you're in an evacuation zone, you should definitely leave as soon as possible.
Well, thank you very much indeed for talking to us, and stay safe. Dan Cuesta, resident in Florida, I must say I'd be out of there as quickly as possible, as quick as you can say, hurricane. We did just show some live pictures of the highway. It looked actually all right. But previously there was massive gridlock. But there you go.
But do stick with us here on Good Afternoon Britain. Lots more coming up in today's programme. Back in a tick.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Some controversial film news. Someone has hired an actor who's white. What the hell is going on?
Let me just fix my hair. Let me just come on. So, Wuthering Heights film stirs controversy after white actor, he's white, chosen to play Heathcliff.
Is that your Humza Yusuf impersonator?
That is, yes, that's my Chinese accent. Experts have gone, oh no, there's a lot of, in recent years, he's definitely black or mixed race because he was found in Liverpool. And as you know, everybody in Liverpool is black or mixed race.
No, I mean, have you read the novel?
God, no.
Right, well, I have. And the novel itself does say, quite explicitly, that he is dark-skinned. Yeah. That the implication is that he's of Romani origin. So he wouldn't be whiter than white, So, I mean...
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that casting... But on the other hand...
This guy's Spanish. His origin's Spanish.
Do you remember when there was a black Anne Boleyn for a Channel 5 miniseries? That seems to be more egregious, because I tell you what, Anne Boleyn definitely wasn't black.
You racist. No, I almost feel sorry in this story, because you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't now. Because if they'd have, it's not like he's a bit of an anti-hero, right? It's not like a good all-round.
He's not a good guy.
So if you go, right, we definitely need to cast someone black for this. What? Why are you picking just black people to play someone with so many character flaws? Or you go, why?
Like they did with Darth Vader.
Yes, that's right.
He was played by the Green Cross Code Man. Okay. Just the voice was done by...
That's true. Yeah. Yes, it was the Green Cross Code Man. I wonder what they were saying there.
Have you ever seen the videos of the original audio of Star Wars?
No.
So you've got... I can't remember his name, but you've got the Green Cross Code Man going like, I find your lack of faith disturbing. Yeah. No, Luke, I am your father.
They should have left it as it was.
This is the difference to me. We're talking about Star Wars. You're like, oh, have you read Bronte, whatever?
She only wrote one novel, Josh. You could... do with the courtesy of reading it.
I'll read it straight after I finish your one.
And it's actually brilliant.
The People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, well, Philip Schofield, he's reignited his feud with Eamon Holmes, accusing him of a betrayal during his exit from This Morning.
Schofield claims that Holmes threw him under the bus and mocked his personal scandals. The rivalry has deepened since Schofield's controversial departure from ITV.
Well, joining us now is entertainment reporter Hayley Palmer. Hayley, Phil's got quite a lot to say when it comes to Eamon Holmes, doesn't he?
Yeah, he really does. I mean, he said
Oh, I'm sorry, Hayley, your line is crackling a lot. We're going to have to try and check on that because it's inaudible, isn't it?
Yeah,
really, Tom?
no, we're going to try and we'll hand you back to our elves behind the scenes.
Oh, well, we'll never know. We'll never know what was going on with Eamon Holmes and Phil Schofield.
No, it is interesting, though, because this has been a big row. I mean, it's rocked the British television world. And I find it fascinating that Philip Schofield has decided to go back on television to appear on this Castaway show.
Do you think he should have just slowly sort of retired?
I think he should have taken a bit of a moment, you know, to sort of...
Little leave of absence.
I think everyone would do well with a moment of silence and a leave of absence.
No, I would never want you to do such a thing.
Well, no, I don't think I've been disgraced quite yet.
Our viewers and listeners would be devastated, gutted if you were to take a leave of absence.
No, I wouldn't dream of it.
You have to be here.
No.
Have to be here by my side.
But other television individuals who have perhaps left their roles in a cloud of disgrace, perhaps it is time for them to have some moment, you know, to themselves.
Never to be seen again. Anyway, we're going to leave you with the Tory leadership contest, getting very exciting indeed, down from 4 to 3.
Yes,
Woohoo, who will make it?
Not long now before Bob Blackman, the chairman of the 1922 committee, announces that result. That will be live here on GB News. You want to stick with us for that result. It could determine the course of politics, at least in 5 years' time, perhaps.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office on what could be quite a thundery Tuesday for some of us. Yes, there will be some sunny spells around, but also plenty of showers because low pressure is dominating the story, and this low pressure is leading to quite an unsettled, unstable picture across the UK at the moment. It's also bringing some blustery winds, especially in the southwest, but also some strong winds across northern parts of Scotland too. Otherwise, and there's going to be some persistent rain across parts of northern England and into southern Scotland, and then plenty of showers for many other areas, especially towards the south-southeast, where they could turn heavy and thundery. Temperatures are going to be a little bit on the high side for the time of year, highs of around 18 or 19 Celsius towards the south, a bit fresher further north. As we go through this evening, there will still be some heavy thundery downpours to watch out for, particularly across central southern parts of England and Wales. Could be some disruption. We do have a warning in force. Further north, something a little bit more persistent rain-wise across parts of perhaps Northern Ireland, but also northern England and southern Scotland. And then further north-northeast across Scotland, yes, it's going to still be quite windy, and there will be some further outbreaks of rain as we go through the end of the day. More unsettled wet weather to come for many of us as we go through the end of the day and overnight. The rain and showers starting to ease a little bit, so turning a bit dry as we go through the early hours of tomorrow morning, but still some wet weather around. There will be some clear spells here and there, but largely cloudy, so towards the south in particular, it's going to be a relatively mild night, a little bit chillier though further north, with temperatures dropping mid-single figures for some. As we go through tomorrow, a bit of a wet start across eastern parts of Scotland, some parts of northeast England, and rain continuing here for a time, but it should break up and clear away later on. And otherwise, there'll be some showers around again, but they don't look like they'll be as frequent or as intense as the ones that we're going to see today. Temperatures still on the relatively warm side towards the south, but turning colder from the north with a northerly wind.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or GB